The tragic truths about your favorite celebrity chefs are just sad. They bring joy to global audiences with their delicious recipes, but outside the kitchen, these TV chefs have faced down some serious hardships in their own lives.
Sometimes a successful career isn't enough to make you happy. Case in point, Gordon Ramsay. Despite his many accomplishments, Ramsay has experienced more than a few ups and downs. And though he's arguably one of the world's most celebrated chefs, he's also endured lots of tragedy in his personal life. In 2007, Gordon Ramsay wrote an article for CNN in which he opened up about his troubled childhood, writing that, "Growing up, my father was less than a perfect role model. I watched how he battled alcoholism and how he became terribly violent with my mom, to the point where she feared for her life. There were instances when the police were called to take him away, mom was taken to the hospital while we kids were taken to a children's home."
20 years ago, I got dealt a dysfunctional card. My little brother became a heroin addict, and my father became an alcoholic.
So many years later, Ramsay still can't comprehend why his mother stayed in such a toxic and abusive relationship. As he puts it, she deserves so much better and so much more. "It still pains me to remember how badly he treated her. I have 4 young children of my own, and I could never see myself behaving the way my father did when I was a child. I want to be a role model for my children and have them look up to me." Elsewhere in the article, Ramsay discusses the work that he and his wife do for the UK charity Women's Aid, an organization that aims to end domestic violence against women and children. He writes that, "Domestic violence is not identified solely by violent physical abuse. Instead, it is defined as physical, psychological, financial, or emotional violence that takes place in a relationship, intimate or family-oriented." As he mentioned, Gordon Ramsay's brother Ronald has endured his own struggles, and it sounds like his issues have had a significant impact on Gordon and his family. In an interview with Jonathan Ross, Gordon Ramsay opened up about his brother's addiction to heroin. "I don't think there is any easy drug, but when you stoop to the depths of heroin, it's very rare you get back. We've done everything we can to help him. Now he just sort of binges and disappears. So that's just a constant reminder, and also being a father of 4 ourselves, you need to be there for them because this stuff is rife." Gordon has seen the darker side of drugs on a few occasions. Years earlier, a colleague reportedly died of a cocaine overdose. In his ITV documentary, Gordon Ramsay on Cocaine, he reveals, "We had dinner the night before he passed. I wish I'd seen signs earlier." In the same program, Ramsay searched for evidence of drug use in his own restaurants.
"Across my London restaurants, I've had 5 staff and 12 customer loos tested."
He reportedly found traces of cocaine in both the staff and guest facilities. As he told Jonathan Ross, "I called a meeting. I didn't throw anyone under the bus. I didn't single anyone out. I just said, look, this is everywhere. It's spotted in the restaurants and it needs to stop." Ramsay claims drug use is quite prevalent in his industry, explaining in his ITV documentary, "I saw cocaine quite early on in my career. I've been served it. I've been given it. I've had my hand shaken and left with little wraps of foil. I've been asked to dust cocaine on top of soufflés, to put it on as icing sugar. Coke's everywhere. It's spiraling out of control."
You know, those samples, those swabs, I mean, some of them are bright blue, and that's in my own business. That's my responsibility.
In 2016, Gordon Ramsay posted this heartfelt message on Facebook. "Hi guys, Tana and I want to thank you so much for your support over the past couple of weeks. We had a devastating weekend as Tana has sadly miscarried our son at 5 months. We're together healing as a family, but we want to thank everyone again for all your amazing support and well wishes. I'd especially like to send a big thank you to the amazing team at Portland Hospital for everything they've done." In 2019, Ramsay and Tana had their 5th child, Oscar James Ramsay. On Instagram, the chef wrote, "After 3 BAFTAs and 1 Emmy, finally we have won an Oscar. Please welcome Oscar James Ramsay, who touched down at 12:58 today for some lunch." Gordon Ramsay has something of a reputation as the tough guy of the cooking world. But even though he may be tough, his emotions were certainly tested back in 2006 when his pet pigs were taken to be slaughtered. In one episode of The F Word, his 2 sows, Trini and Susanna, were killed, and Ramsay watched the whole process.
"I'm not very happy to see you girls go. Yes?"
The chef watched his pigs get stunned by an electric shock. Then they were shackled by their hind legs, hoisted to the ceiling, and each had their throats cut. The bodies were then placed into a scalding tank, shaved, and disemboweled. Though Ramsay had raised the pigs expressly for this purpose, it was still a difficult thing to watch. Describing the experience, Ramsay said, "It was not pleasant. The whole operation is extraordinary. Quite emotional, really. I felt sick as a dog in there. Next, I will think of something really nice to cook with them. But it's not a nice experience." Channel 4's decision to air the slaughter was met with praise from the animal rights group PETA. In a statement, the organization said, "Paul McCartney once said that if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everyone would be vegetarian. If the F-word slaughter turns out to be as graphic and gory as we hear it is, then these animals' deaths will not have been completely in vain, since they will turn many compassionate people into vegetarians." Trini and Susanna were later served to guests at a barbecue. Certainly not a happy ending, at least not for the pigs.
Lily, large one, medium one, or small one?
Large one.
There we go. Up. Off you go, my darling.
While filming his hit TV series The F Word, Gordon Ramsay almost died after losing his footing during a hike in Iceland.
I'm just worried about standing up on the side of this.
Well, you shouldn't worry too much.
No, forget that.
Forget that.
Ramsay and his production crew were visiting the country's Westman Islands, and he apparently fell while descending a rock face. Ramsay hit the water, and his heavy boots only pulled him down further, causing the chef to panic, despite being a normally excellent swimmer. Ramsay told The Sun, "I thought I was a goner. They say cats have 9 lives. I've had 12 already, and I don't know how many more I'll have." Eventually, Ramsay freed himself and swam back to the surface, having spent 45 seconds underwater. His crew thought he'd been killed, but they eventually managed to throw him a rope and hauled him back to safety. Ramsay was treated for a knee injury back at his hotel before undergoing a medical examination in London. He told The Sun, "I didn't tell my wife Tana at first. I chickened out, but she knew something was up. She was upset and extremely pissed off. When I was underwater, all I could think of was Tana and my kids." Gordon Ramsay was once headed down a very different career path. In an article for The Guardian, he opened up about his obsession with soccer, writing, "My Uncle Roland took me to my first game. I was 7 and I went on his shoulders. The crowd was just phenomenal. We were standing by the terraces and I remember getting slightly nervous and very scared, and I loved it." Ramsay soon took up playing soccer as a hobby. As he puts it, "I was a naturally aggressive left back, a cutthroat tackler. You may have got past once, but there was never ever a second occasion, and I was fast."
My dream came true when I was spotted by a scout in the mid-80s and I joined the youth team here at Ibrox.
His parents eventually moved back to Glasgow so he could sign for the Scottish professional football club Rangers FC. And Ramsay even ended up playing a small number of non-league games as a trial. Ramsay writes that, "The games were really violent, not like the soccer we see nowadays. And then I got my bad injury. I tore my ligaments, and it was a heartache." Despite slowly working his way back to physical fitness, he was let go from the team. He writes that, "I couldn't swallow it. I was gutted. Gutted. I can remember coming back downstairs and thinking, hell. And worst of all, I still had to tell my dad, who was waiting for me in a transit van parked about 600 yards away from the main entrance." Ramsay took his first catering course soon after this unfortunate turn of events. And though he found vast success in that arena, he certainly has a few regrets. As he writes in The Guardian, "Would I swap what I have achieved as a cook if I could have been as successful in soccer? Definitely, because there is a great feeling when you are excited and run out onto that pitch. And I don't give a fig when anyone says. There's such a huge rush." It's taken a while, but it seems Gordon Ramsay has finally learned a lesson about the impact of his famous insults. The chef expressed regret for the comments he made against Australian TV personality Tracy Grimshaw following her somewhat awkward interview with the hot-headed chef.
"Now, are you comfortable? You've become such a prima donna since the last time you were here. Your chair wasn't comfortable, your mic wasn't right."
The next day at an event, Ramsay reportedly displayed a photograph of a woman with a pig's face to a crowd of 3,000 people, and likened the image to Grimshaw. He reportedly told the crowd, "That's Tracy Grimshaw. I had an interview with her yesterday. Holy crap, she needs to see Simon Cowell's Botox doctor." The comments were roundly criticized. In fact, even his mother was offended by the remarks. Ramsay told the Melbourne Herald Sun that he took his mom's criticism to heart and tried to clear the air with Grimshaw. "I made a strong attempt on Saturday to contact her, and I suppose like any petulant teenager, when you get ignored, the whole thing escalated. I tried to contact her, there was no response on Saturday, so I kept jibbing away at her. I wish I'd had a chance to put this fire out 3 days ago." Grimshaw publicly responded to Ramsay's remarks, claiming, "Truly, I wonder how many people would laugh if they were effectively described as an old, ugly pig. How is that funny exactly? And worse, it's not even witty. I spent all yesterday thinking about how to respond, and I honestly thought about saying nothing at all. But we all know bullies thrive when no one takes them on. And I'm not going to sit meekly and let some arrogant narcissist bully me."
But despite what his publicist said in Damage Control, we do not have a great relationship. We have no relationship at all.
This might not come as much of a shock to you, but Gordon Ramsay has a long-standing feud with Chef Jamie Oliver. Over the years, they've both made it abundantly clear that they can't stand each other. And they both seem to relish any opportunity to insult the other. Following Ramsay's rude treatment of Tracy Grimshaw, Oliver publicly criticized Ramsay in the press, telling The Sun, "Aussies aren't forgiving. Once you're gone, you're gone. It's never good to criticize a woman, especially when they're loved by their country, and you do it on national television." In response, Ramsay said, "Jamie Oliver is a one-pot wonder." A year later, Oliver told the Mirror that Tana Ramsay was a better cook than her husband. As he put it, "If I was to choose between Gordon Ramsay's cookbook or Tana Ramsay's, it would be Tana's every time."
Flying over 6,000 miles tonight just for this dinner. My gorgeous wife of 18 years, Tana.
This back and forth went on for years, but things came to a head when Oliver said, "Ramsay's got 4 kids and I've got 5 kids." Though it might have been an innocent remark, Oliver made the comment after Tana had a miscarriage. Ramsay demanded an apology and vowed to never speak to Oliver again. He told the Radio Times, "Boys will always fight and butt heads, but Tana was mortified. I mean, really mortified."
In my book, there's only one thing worse than disappointing me, and that's disappointing my amazing wife.
Andrew Zimmern may have trotted the globe in his quest to try the world's most exotic foods, but his personal life wasn't always so glamorous. From being unhoused to struggling with his mental health, the celebrity chef has endured plenty of hardships. Andrew Zimmern was born in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. What sounds like a prosperous beginning was complicated due to Zimmern's less than traditional family life. His parents were best friends who married and had a child, despite Zimmern's mother being aware of her husband's homosexuality. When Zimmern was about 5 years old, his father decided to live as an openly gay man. Zimmern's parents subsequently divorced. When speaking to the Hilarious World of Depression podcast, Zimmern recalled that he began suffering from mental health issues around the age of 5. As a result, he started behaving in a compulsive, risk-taking manner that foreshadowed what was to come. He liked shoplifting, for instance. These compulsions also involved drinking. In an interview with the Back from Broken podcast, Zimmern talks about sipping his dad's scotch and soda, though he believes that it was more about the naughtiness of the act than the alcohol itself. Zimmern admitted, "I was addicted to the sneakiness and the lying before I was addicted to how the booze made me feel." After Zimmern's parents split, he lived with his mother and saw his father on the weekends until a tragic accident changed everything. In the summer of 1974, Zimmern, then 13, came home from sleepaway camp to learn his mother was in a coma. Because the wrong anesthesia was administered, her oxygen flow failed and she sustained serious brain damage. When she came out of the months-long coma, Zimmern saw the full extent to which her state of mind had been altered. As he revealed on the Back from Broken podcast, she spent years in hospitals, mental health clinics trying to get right, instead of dying, where there could be an opportunity to complete a grieving process. The mother that I knew the first 13 years of my life, she was gone and she was replaced by someone else. As a child in the 1960s, Zimmern flirted with alcohol in grade school and says he first got drunk at around the tender age of 10. By the onset of his teens, and in the wake of his mother's medical tragedy, Zimmern was often left unsupervised at home. In an attempt to quell his confusing feelings of anxiety and sadness, he began to dial up his drinking and drug use.
I was a drug addict and alcoholic since I was 13 years old.
At 13, Zimmern used the family credit at the liquor store to keep himself stocked with alcohol and even dipped into his mother's emergency cash fund to buy drugs. By 15, he was smoking marijuana and snorting cocaine before school. Zimmern eventually began dealing drugs and relying on a daily cocktail of marijuana, cocaine, alcohol, and pills. He was able to maintain good grades, but before he had even graduated high school, he'd experimented with heroin. In college, he studied history and art history, but often took semesters off due to his intensifying addictions. When he wasn't in school, Zimmern traveled abroad to study cooking, learning from chefs in Italy, France, and Hong Kong. Even in the mire of substance abuse, Zimmern was able to express his passion for food. When he was young, Zimmern often accompanied his father, an advertising executive, on international business trips. When they weren't continent hopping and digging into exotic fare, his father kept company with a prestigious circle of foodies that included the renowned chef James Beard. In his youth, Zimmern frequented Sunday brunches at Beard's home. Although Zimmern's father was pivotal in inspiring the youngsters' cultural curiosity surrounding food, their relationship had its difficult points. When Zimmern's mother fell into a coma, his father didn't take him in. Instead, the 13-year-old lived alone in his mother's apartment. Zimmern summed up the complicated scenario on the Back from Broken podcast, saying, "My father continues to this day to be my hero. I have him on a pedestal. It took me 25 years into sobriety to get to the point where I could admit that day when my father dropped me off at the apartment, that he abandoned me." Through the ups and downs of Zimmern's young life, one constant was his infatuation with food. He grew up cooking with his mother and grandmother and spent summers working his first job at a seafood restaurant on Long Island. After graduating from Vassar College in 1984, Zimmern plunged into the New York City fine dining scene. He rose to prominence as a chef before becoming a restaurateur and partner in a food service development and consulting group. All the while, he dealt with severe drug and alcohol addiction, to the point where Zimmern admits that he doesn't remember most of the 1980s.
It crashed and cratered me.
By the early 1990s, Zimmern could no longer hide his addictions, yet he wasn't ready to quit. He was evicted from successive apartments, while his relationships with friends and family hung by a thread. Then, one of Zimmern's consulting clients found Zimmern passed out on the floor. His partners fired him. Zimmern went to a bar and encountered a group of squatters, whom he followed back to the abandoned building in Lower Manhattan where they lived. Zimmern spent about a year there. At the squatters' den, Zimmern slept on a pile of dirty clothes on the floor. He shoplifted cleaner from a bodega and sprinkled it around where he slept to ward off rats and cockroaches. Looking back on this desperate time in his life, Zimmerman said on the Back from Broken podcast, "I just can't imagine doing that today. It's beyond my comprehension. And yet I did it. And the reason that I did was that I believed with every ounce of my being. I did not have a choice. There was no choice. I had to do it." Plagued by defeat and overcome with shame, Zimmerman's breaking point came in early 1992 when he stole jewelry from his godmother and sold it for $200. With the money, he booked a room at a flop house, bought 2 cases of vodka, took them to his room, and ripped the phone jack out of the wall. Zimmerman drank almost continuously for about 4 days until an unexpected moment of clarity came over him, which he revisited on the Let's Talk Addiction and Recovery podcast. He said, "For the first time since I was 7 or 8 years old, I didn't have that ace bandage of pressure around my chest. And for whatever reason, I did something that I had never done before in my whole life, which was ask another human being for help." He plugged the phone back in and called his friend Clark, who brought Zimmerman to his home to bathe and sober up. While Clark was at work, Zimmerman drank all the alcohol in the home and stole his friend's change to buy more. What Zimmerman didn't know was that Clark had already helped plan his intervention in rehab. In 1992, Zimmerman touched down in Minnesota at Hazelden, a respected rehab center in the Twin Cities. Zimmerman worked through his 12-step recovery program, and after 5 weeks in treatment, transitioned into a halfway house where he was expected to get a day job. He started working as a dishwasher at Dubin's Cafe in St. Paul, and to this day considers it the best job he's ever had, as he told Tasting Table. His next gig was as a busboy at Café Un Deux Trois. By the time he moved out of the halfway house, Zimmerman was the restaurant's executive chef. He held the position until 1998 when he left his post to seek new opportunities.
And just started building.
When his ventures didn't materialize the way he'd hoped, a sober and ambitious Zimmerman set his sights on food media. He started local, with food reviews and short-form TV segments. Eventually, his pitch for Bizarre Foods was picked up by Travel Channel. The show would become one of the most lucrative for the network and rocket Zimmerman to celebrity status. Bizarre Foods brought Zimmerman continued success, at least until a controversial 2018 interview with Fast Company caused a blip on what had been a smooth path for the popular TV host. The interview, which took place at the 2018 Minnesota State Fair, seemed lighthearted enough, but when talk turned to Zimmerman's latest project, a soon-to-open Chinese restaurant called Lucky Cricket, the conversation got awkward fast. In an attempt to vividly illustrate his goal of opening 200 Lucky Cricket establishments in Middle America, Zimmerman described himself as an entrepreneur with a soul who wanted to make the world a better place. Okay, fair. But then he capped that sentiment off by saying,
"I think I'm saving the souls of all the people from having to dine at these horse restaurants masquerading as Chinese food that are in the Midwest."
The backlash was almost instantaneous. Zimmerman took to Facebook to address his blunder and apologize to the Chinese American community. Filming halted mid-season on Bizarre Foods, and on another show of his that was being produced at the time, The Zimmerman List. The ultimate cancellation of Bizarre Foods put an end to Zimmerman's 12-year Bizarre Foods legacy that spanned 199 episodes. Whether Zimmerman's controversial comments were the cause of his restaurant woes is hard to say. Lucky Cricket opened in St. Louis Park, Minnesota in November 2018, but food journalists can be extra critical of celebrity-owned restaurants, and in light of Zimmerman's controversial Fast Company interview, skepticism was unavoidable.
I should have been much more judicious in my choice of words.
Reviews ranged from positive to questionable to cutting. The kitschy decor and inconsistencies in food quality were common callouts. By July 2019, the restaurant closed its doors. Despite only being open for 8 months, Lucky Cricket claimed the closure was due to renovations. Nearly 2 months later, the restaurant reopened with a rebooted menu that included Vietnamese and Korean-inspired dishes. Lucky Cricket closed a second time during the COVID-19 pandemic and never reopened. In the years that Zimmerman was filming Bizarre Foods, he visited over 170 countries and traveled 250 days out of the year. When he wasn't on location for Bizarre Foods, Zimmerman's schedule was full of public appearances and other events, leading to a popularity and time away that was difficult for his family. To make matters more complicated, Zimmerman has been open about developmental challenges faced by his son Noah, who was born in 2005. In 2014, Zimmerman told Minneapolis St. Paul magazine, "2.5 years ago, our family was in crisis." He then thanked the Washburn Center for Children in Minneapolis for implementing a treatment plan that involved the whole family. Yet the demands of his job persisted. Amidst the mounting pressures of his fame and reputation, Zimmern felt he had no choice but to fulfill the many obligations that came with celebrity. He addressed the difficulty in an interview with MinnPost, saying this about his family: "They are victims of my popularity. I'm sure more days than not, they would say it's not worth it, but I have this business to support." Zimmern met his wife, Rashia Haas, at a cooking school in 1999, where he was teaching and she worked in the shop. When they married in 2002, Zimmern had years of sobriety under his belt, but wasn't famous yet. Although Zimmern often commented in the press about how his demanding job didn't make family life easy, what the public didn't know at the time was that it was also wearing his marriage down. In 2018, around the time Zimmern was preparing to open his restaurant Lucky Cricket, he was also in the midst of a separation from his wife. By March 2020, the divorce had been finalized. Though his marriage dissolved and his demanding schedule shows no signs of letting up, Zimmern has found peace in these challenges. He is a devoted father, telling the New York Times, "I want to be the best dad and the best ex I can be."
Anthony Bourdain was a chef, writer, and world traveler who charmed practically everyone he met in his remarkable life. But beneath the glamour, he was a complex and emotional person who felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. This is the tragic truth about Anthony Bourdain's life. By all accounts, Anthony Bourdain had a relatively normal American childhood, growing up in the 60s and 70s in suburban New Jersey. But Bourdain admitted that he never quite felt normal in this normal environment. He told NPR in 2017, "I was an angry kid. For whatever reason, I was definitely a very angry, bitter, nihilistic, destructive, and self-destructive kid. Part of it stems from Bourdain's lifelong itch to get the most he possibly could out of life, be it good, bad, or ugly." He explained to The Guardian in 2013, "I was rebellious and bitter that I wasn't old enough to be in San Francisco dropping acid. I had impeccable taste in rock and roll for a 10-year-old, yet was too young to live that life. It made me angry. Most of my friends had rich absentee parents or came from broken homes, so they were free to do whatever they wanted. I deeply resented the relative stability at my house." So he developed a stubborn, free-spirited streak that stayed with him into adulthood. When asked by Men's Journal what advice he would give his younger self, Bourdain responded, "I wouldn't have listened. That's the kind of asshole I was. I would have gone right ahead and made the same mistakes." Anthony Bourdain's rise to culinary success and eventually global fame was anything but glamorous. He got his start in the food world back in the mid-70s, working through college as a dishwasher at a restaurant in Provincetown, Massachusetts. Bourdain quickly moved from the sink to the line, where he learned just how undeveloped his skill set was compared to the other cooks. But he was passionate and he was hooked. So he dropped out of college and enrolled in the Culinary Institute of America. After graduating in 1978, Bourdain slogged through the culinary ranks of New York City restaurants, working long hours and spending late-night after-hours doing drugs and living a rock star lifestyle.
Come on, put down the crack pipe and make the dessert.
It took 2 decades before he was eventually named the executive chef at Brasserie Leal. The whole experience, the labor, the grind, the substance abuse, was tough on him and made him tougher and meaner in turn. Bourdain told The Guardian in 2017 of the, quote, psychotic rage he felt during those years. He said he was awful to line cooks, abusive to waiters, and bullying to dishwashers, adding, "I hurt, disappointed, and offended many, many, many people, and I regret a lot." While working in kitchens, Bourdain was simultaneously developing his passion for writing. It was this skill set that would eventually catapult Bourdain's career and change his life forever. While he may be one of the most well-known figures in the culinary world, Anthony Bourdain didn't become a celebrity until he was in his 40s. And up until that point, he lived without much of a sense of stability or security. When Bourdain first started out after culinary school, he was barely getting by. In a 2017 interview with Wealthsimple magazine, he recalled those days by saying, "I never went home with more than $120. Not a lot of dough. I was staying with my then girlfriend. I ate most of my meals at work." He was in a cycle of debt he couldn't get out of and was always a paycheck behind. Kitchen Confidential, the book that launched Bourdain's career and changed his life, was published in 2000 when the chef was 44 years old. At that point in time, Bourdain admitted that he hadn't filed taxes in about 10 years and was also behind on his rent. He'd never had health insurance or a savings account. As a result, Bourdain said that he spent every day trying to deal with the stress of financial precarity. He said, "In my daily life, the goal was to muffle the anxiety that I'd feel as I tried to drift off to sleep, knowing that at any point, what little money I had in my bank account could be garnished by the IRS or the credit card company. The landlord could kick me to the curb. That was my reality for many years." Even after his success kicked off in earnest, Bourdain lived his life battling inner demons. He once called himself an unhappy soul in an interview with The Guardian. In the early 2000s, after his first marriage ended, he admitted in his book Medium Raw to being aimless and regularly suicidal. Eventually, he acknowledged that he was living with depression. Bourdain opened up about his struggles during an episode of Parts Unknown in 2016. While filming in Argentina, he spoke with a therapist about how even things which seemed insignificant could trigger major bouts of sorrow and despondency. Something as trivial as a bad hamburger at the airport, he said, had the potential to set him off, launching him into a prolonged spiral of depression. He also admitted to feeling alone.
I feel kind of like a freak, and I feel very isolated. I communicate for a living, but I'm terrible at communicating with people I care about.
In an interview with People just 4 months before his death, Bourdain confessed, "There have been times, honestly, in my life that I figured, I've had a good run. Why not just do this stupid thing, this selfish thing, jump off a cliff into water of indeterminate depth?" While Anthony Bourdain spent his TV career shining the spotlight on other people's food and cultures, at the end of the day, he believed himself to be a narcissist.
A reasonable person does not believe that you are so interesting that people will watch you on television. I think this is evidence of a narcissistic personality disorder.
Despite this self-professed view of himself, Bourdain was also overwhelmed by his own fame. He told Business Insider in 2016, "I work really hard to not ever think about my place in the world. I'm aware of my good fortune. I'm very aware of it. And I'm very aware that, because of it, people offer me things." Filmmaker Morgan Neville, who documented Bourdain's life story in the film Roadrunner, told Rolling Stone this sense of awareness was like an insecurity that always pushed Bourdain forward. He never slowed down working. It wasn't money. It was just Tony feeling like if he slowed down, something was going to catch up with him. In the wake of his death, family, friends, and coworkers are revealing more about the struggles they witnessed Anthony Bourdain deal with. For the most part, he suffered in silence and didn't do much to tackle his issues head-on. While filming his new documentary on Bourdain's life, filmmaker Morgan Neville learned of the chef's battles with a range of mental health issues, including depression, anxiety, agoraphobia, OCD, bipolar episodes, and an addictive personality. Speaking to Vanity Fair, Neville said, "I think what drove his unhappiness was that he was somebody who had been running away from his deeper problems for a long time. Part of that is what made him interesting, great as a personality and compelling to watch. But part of it made him an incredibly vulnerable person." Bourdain had implied in the past that he maybe didn't deserve to confront his own unhappiness, saying he felt he wasn't going to get a lot of sympathy from people.
I'm not going to get a lot of sympathy from people, frankly. I mean, I have the best job in the world, let's face it.
Anthony Bourdain was a beloved figure to millions of people in the food industry and beyond. But within the tight circle of the culinary TV world, he also managed to make quite a few enemies. Mostly because Bourdain had a lot of strong opinions, and he had no hesitation in making them known, no matter how harsh. He's hit targets across the culinary spectrum with reckless abandon. From Wolfgang Puck to Rachel Ray to Paula Deen, whom he called, quote, "the worst, most dangerous person to America." And then, of course, there was the years-long feud with Guy Fieri after Bourdain remarked to TV Guide that he looked like a Simpsons character. Perhaps Bourdain's most intense clash, though, was with the entire Food Network. After his first TV show, A Cook's Tour, saw relative success, Bourdain was ready to continue traveling the world and exploring out-of-the-box and unknown cuisines. However, the Food Network wanted him to crank out ratings by focusing on familiar domestic comforts like barbecue. So Bourdain walked away, made a deal with the Travel Channel, and soon after, No Reservations was born. No one would disagree that Anthony Bourdain was the type of person to call things exactly as he saw them. It was something that many people admired, and it was also something that got him in hot water sometimes. Interview after interview can be found of him blasting off snarky comments about fellow celebrity chefs, the pitfalls of Western dining culture, politicians, and more. If Bourdain had something to say, the world was going to hear it. But those who knew him best experienced a whole other Anthony Bourdain, one that was reserved, a little goofy, extremely humble, and kind. Brasserie Leal owner Philippe Lajeunie told GQ that he remembered Bourdain as being, quote, very quiet, almost timid. Close friend and fellow chef Eric Ripert recalled that he never complained about anything. Speaking to Vanity Fair, many of the fixers who worked with Bourdain recalled how he respected and engaged them in ways not commonly seen in the industry. But perhaps chef and friend Gabrielle Hamilton summed it up best, telling GQ, Tony lavishes you with love and friendship and generosity and kindness. It was breathtaking to be loved by him. The culinary world and the millions of others who cherished Anthony Bourdain were brought to a standstill with the tragic news of his death on Friday, June 8, 2018. CNN reported that Bourdain was in France filming a new episode of Parts Unknown along with French chef Eric Ripert when he died. It was Ripert, a longtime close friend of Bourdain's, who found him unresponsive in his hotel room at the Le Chambard Hotel in Kaysersberg that morning. French authorities quickly ruled the 61-year-old's death a suicide. After his death, CNN and the show's production company 0.0 decided not to air the episode Bourdain was working on at the time, set to showcase France's Alsace region. They did, however, decide to honor Bourdain's work and legacy by piecing together a final season of Parts Unknown. From the moment the news broke of Anthony Bourdain's death, his impact on the world became even more clear. Tributes came pouring in like a tidal wave from those who knew him, worked with him, briefly met him, or only ever saw him through their TV screens. Millions came together to mourn the loss of a great chef and an even greater teacher who demonstrated how to experience food, embrace its power to bridge divides, and use that power to better understand life and humanity. One thing is for sure, Anthony Bourdain will never be forgotten. Lydia Tenalia, the co-founder of ZPZ Productions, said after Bourdain's death that the work he started will carry on in his honor. She told GQ, through all these years of working with him, through osmosis, we have the same creative force and integrity as that guy, and we're trying to move forward with it. Bourdain's brother, Christopher, told the Today Show that he hopes people learn from Bourdain's open-mindedness when interacting with unfamiliar people and places, and come to appreciate diversity in the wholehearted way he did. Filmmaker Morgan Neville, speaking with CBS News, described Bourdain as the advocate in our society for how we can treat people on the far side of the planet as dimensional people who have their own dreams and loves and families and hopes. That is the greatest achievement that he had.
Mayor of Flavortown sounds like a pretty cushy gig, but outside of the kitchen, Guy Fieri has been hit with legal troubles, while his loved ones have endured serious illnesses. When Guy Fieri was just 10 years old, he endured a nearly life-threatening accident. He was riding his horse near his home one day when it suddenly bucked him off and trampled him underfoot. Fieri's heart was injured and a ligament was torn off of his liver, which required emergency surgery. At the time, his parents were backpacking in Europe, so he needed a court order and a lawyer's proxy signature before he could have the surgery. Despite all this, Fieri wasn't scared off horseback riding forever. Far from it, in fact, as he's owned horses as an adult. When Fieri was a 19-year-old college student at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, he was hanging out one day at a drag boat race with a group from a neighboring campground. They'd all been drinking. One person panicked when he saw a police officer and then ended up in a car chase. The car flipped, resulting in multiple injuries and one death. Fieri was airlifted out by helicopter and awoke to find himself handcuffed to a hospital bed. It turned out that the friends all knew each other from their military service, so they collectively decided to save their buddy from prosecution for drunk driving and manslaughter by claiming that Fieri had been the driver. Ultimately, though, he avoided any prison time. He now uses this experience as a lesson for his kids to not be too trusting with people that they don't know. In February 2011, Fieri's younger sister, Morgan Fieri, died from metastatic melanoma, a fast-spreading form of skin cancer. Her first bout with cancer actually happened when she was just 4 years old, and Guy was 8. She recovered at the time, but alas, the cancer returned when she was an adult, and she died when she was only 38. After Morgan's passing, Guy and his wife Lori helped to raise her son Jules. Since his mom's death, Jules has gone on to graduate from California State University, San Marcos, and work in the music business. In September 2023, on what would have been Morgan's 51st birthday, Guy remembered her on Instagram by writing, "Happy 51st birthday to my little sister Morgan. Miss ya, sis. Namaste."
And then my most important tattoo is in memory of my sister Morgan. This is her. It's Botticelli's Venus. That's what always reminded me of her.
Morgan was unfortunately not the only member of Guy Fieri's family who had a deadly disease, as their father, Jim Ferry, endured a bout with pancreatic cancer. But as of 2018, when he was 76 years old, he was declared cancer-free. This was just 7 years after Jim's daughter and Guy's sister Morgan passed away. He's since become an advocate for others struggling with the disease. Guy Fieri has praised both of his parents for their strength in the face of tragedy and death. As he told People magazine in 2022, "When you watch your mom and dad bury their kid and still get up and go live their life, and of course do it with a ton of sorrow, I mean, we can't talk about my sister without my mom crying, but they go and do it every day. And I don't know how they can do it. I don't know that I have that kind of strength as a person." So they're great examples to follow. Guy Fieri has been hosting his signature show, Diners, Drive-Ins, and Dives, since 2006. It's been a massive success, but it hasn't been without its struggles. Specifically, in 2011, it was embroiled in a serious lawsuit, as one of the show's producers, David Page, sued Food Network after they tried to replace him. The network countersued, with allegations that Page had created a toxic work environment by missing deadlines, turning in incomplete work, and mistreating his employees. Page tried to direct blame towards Fieri by claiming that the host would cancel shoots and not respond to correspondence in an effort to make Page look bad and get him kicked off the show. Ultimately, Food Network removed Page from his position and went forward without him. But that wasn't quite the end of the story, as Page accused Fieri of being lewd, homophobic, and anti-Semitic while working on the show. He also accused the host of making inappropriate sexual comments and constantly looking at women's breasts instead of their faces. But the claims ultimately didn't hold much water. For one thing, Fieri's sister Morgan was openly gay, and in 2015, he officiated at a group wedding for 101 gay couples. A publicist for Fieri told Eater, "Guy's reputation speaks for itself. He's a stand-up guy who does right by people. He would never make the kind of comments attributed to him in the story, and anyone who knows or has even met him knows that Mr. Page made these sadly desperate statements says more about him than it does about Guy or anyone on the Food Network team." 2011 was unfortunately quite the eventful year for Guy Fieri. In addition to his sister dying and dealing with a lawsuit, his $200,000 Lamborghini Gallardo was stolen that same year. He'd left the car at a dealership for routine service work. It remained missing for a year before police found it in a storage facility registered to a 19-year-old named Max Wade. They also found a motorcycle, weapons, and ammunition in the facility.
Brave kid.
Wade was also accused of using the motorcycle and weapons in an attempted drive-by shooting. Fieri ended up having to testify at a trial in 2013, while Wade ended up being sentenced to life in prison for attempted murder. On Fieri's end, this wasn't exactly the biggest tragedy compared to everything else that was going on in his life, although it was almost certainly a pain for him to have to deal with. The late Anthony Bourdain was a well-respected celebrity chef, but he also had a habit of making fun of other people in the culinary world, including Guy Fieri. For his part, Fieri was a little taken aback by this treatment. As he told GQ in 2015, "He's never talked to my face. It's just, what are you doing? What is your instigation? You have nothing else to worry about than if I have bleached hair or not? I mean, the bad blood reportedly began back in 2008 when Bourdain compared Fieri to the Simpsons character Poochie, who was formed by a committee of TV executives.
"I have to go now. My planet needs me."
The rancor continued in 2011 when Fieri's Lamborghini was stolen, and Bourdain made fun of the situation on Twitter. In 2012, Fieri was part of a group that got together to roast Bourdain for all the negative things that he'd said about them. Bourdain countered by calling Fieri's new Times Square restaurant a 500-seat deuce. Then in 2015, Bourdain went on a stand-up tour called Close to the Bone, in which he roasted Guy Fieri and others. He also admitted to making some adjustments in his life after becoming a father, but he still had this to say about his old sparring partner. "I sort of feel in a heartfelt way for Guy Fieri. I wonder about him. He's 52 years old and still rolling around in the flame outfit." In 2013, Guy Fieri was on his way home from San Francisco International Airport along with his hairdresser, Ariel Ramirez. They had both been drinking during their flight, so they used a ride service to get home. But it wasn't exactly a peaceful trip.
Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night.
TMZ obtained video that showed Ramirez standing outside the SUV and punching Fieri, who was still inside. Fieri countered by kicking, while the two of them both yelled obscenities. A rep for Fieri told TMZ, "A bunch of guys were messing around. Things got a little out of hand, but they're all good now." When Guy Fieri tried to open up a wine tasting room near his home and vineyard in Santa Rosa, California, his neighbors weren't exactly happy about that. Indeed, more than 100 of them showed up in 2014 to a hearing about the tasting room. Their concerns included potential noise pollution, drunk driving, and trash. In response to the neighbors' concerns, the zoning board wrote up a document with 76 conditions that Fieri had to follow to open the tasting room. However, the board ultimately rejected his proposal anyway. Fieri decided against appealing the decision. So while his Hunt and Ride label started producing wine in 2015, there's no public tasting room to go along with it. In 2015, Guy Fieri decided to shut down his Johnny Garlic's restaurant chain. Alas, that led to his business partner, Steven Gruber, suing him. The first Johnny Garlic's location opened way back in 1996, but after 19 years, Fieri decided that it was time to abandon ship. However, Gruber didn't believe that the restaurant's days were over, so he sued Fieri to keep it open. Fieri had plenty of other restaurants keeping him busy, so he didn't really need Johnny Garlic's anymore. In the lawsuit, Gruber sought to buy up Fieri's half of the business so that he could continue its operations. A year earlier, one Johnny Garlic's location had already closed without any warning, so clearly there were signs of trouble. Unfortunately, without Fieri, the restaurant started to become even more run down, and they're now all permanently closed. Guy Fieri's American Kitchen and Bar in Times Square has developed a rather unsavory reputation after a few inspections revealed insect infestations. In January 2016, for example, a variety of flies were uncovered throughout the restaurant. As the report detailed, filth flies include houseflies, little houseflies, blowflies, bottle flies, and flesh flies. Food/refuse/sewage-associated flies include fruit flies, drain flies, and forage flies. According to that one section, that's a total of 8 types of flies thriving where customers surely didn't appreciate them. Nevertheless, the restaurant squeaked by with a score of B on the inspection. A year earlier, inspectors had found roaches.
I buried those cockroaches!
American Kitchen and Bar's pest issues proved to be a bad omen for what was to come. By the end of 2017, the Times Square location was closed. However, as of 2023, there are still locations open in the US and another 5 internationally. So while we're sure that Fieri doesn't appreciate hearing about all the bugs running around his restaurants, this story certainly could have been a lot worse. Guy Fieri is one of the biggest brand names in the restaurant business. In total, he has 175 delivery-only and 80 full restaurant locations worldwide. One of the newest spots is a place called Downtown Flavortown in the town of Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. In addition to the food and drinks, it also boasts an arcade and bowling lanes. But alas, it's not all fun and games. In 2022, just a few months after opening, Downtown Flavortown was hit with a lawsuit for breaking the Fair Labor Standards Act. The owners allegedly asked employees who worked for tips to also perform non-tipped work. This included cleaning and upkeep tasks, as well as preparing food for customers. Since they weren't getting tips for these time-consuming duties, the employees claimed that they should be paid at least minimum wage for carrying them out. The lawsuit sought to get these employees back pay for all the non-tipped work they'd already performed. The suit also sought to get the owners to change the policies about their pay and responsibilities. Breaking the law is never a great look, and the spotlight tends to be bright when someone as famous as Fieri is involved.
She's the picture of effervescence on TV, but in her personal life, Rachael Ray has endured legal troubles, destroyed homes, and painful family strife. Rachael Ray has one of the most recognizable faces in the culinary world, but perhaps even more recognizable is her iconic voice.
Oh my God, I'm not that much of a big mouth!
But while that quality has endeared her to plenty of fans, it's also related to childhood illnesses that she suffered through. Ray has been open about the fact that she endured multiple instances of croup, a type of infection that tightens the upper airway and causes coughing and difficulty breathing. And her vocal cord troubles continued into adulthood. In 2008, there were even rumors that she had throat cancer. Those rumors turned out to be false, but that isn't to say that Ray was completely fine. A representative for Ray told People magazine in October 2008 that she needed surgery on her vocal cords, but that it was just to remove a benign cyst. The surgery took place in December, and Ray's tapings for Food Network and her talk show went on as planned. According to the New York City Police Department, there were 1,417 instances of robbery in the city in January 2024. Since New York has a population of over 8 million people, you only have about a 0.01% chance of being mugged there. In general, it would be fair to conclude then that it's a relatively safe place to walk around in. Nevertheless, Rachael Ray has been mugged in New York on multiple occasions. As she admitted to People magazine in 2007, when she was working in Manhattan and living in Queens in the late 1990s, she was mugged by the same person twice in 1 week. The first time, he assaulted her in her apartment's foyer, prompting Ray to pull out her mace. The second time, the assailant was more forceful. As Ray recalled, "He dragged me down the alley and beat the crap out of me with his gun." This prompted Ray to move back to the Adirondacks section of upstate New York, where she then began to work managing restaurants on Lake George. If you're a fan of Rachael Ray, then you surely know how important family is to her, especially her mother Elsa, who accompanied her daughter to her first appearance on Today, which led to Ray being noticed by the Food Network. But like many close-knit families, Ray's has experienced their fair share of tragedy, like in 2013 when her Aunt Geraldine passed away at the age of 77. Geraldine was house-sitting for her niece in November when she went outside to feed the birds and locked herself out of the home. After trying to break a window to get back inside, she collapsed in the frigid temperatures and was discovered the next day. Geraldine's daughter Gina blamed her cousin for the death and negligence. She also noted that her mother hadn't been given her own key for the house sitting and that she likely collapsed due to lung issues. The family tension got even worse when Ray didn't attend the funeral, as she was taping a show at the time. Her brother Manny later came to her defense and claimed that no one else was upset that she didn't show up to the funeral. Rachael Ray's husband, John Cusimano, gets nearly as much attention as his wife does. An actor, lawyer, producer, and musician, he frequently accompanies her on her shows, at public events, and on her social media accounts. They might even seem like the definition of couple goals. They've been married for nearly 20 years, as they wed at a Tuscan castle in 2005 and renewed their vows in the same venue in 2015. They've also returned to the castle every year with family and friends to celebrate their anniversary.
Here's my beautiful bride. Hi, honey.
Ciao! Happy anniversary!
Despite all those happy traditions, this marriage hasn't been without its share of trouble, including rumors of infidelity. One woman from Florida allegedly met Cusimano in New York in 2000 and carried on an affair with him for years. Various publications have claimed that he's cheated as many as 6 times, but Ray has been having none of it. As she insisted to People magazine in 2007, "I've known where he is every night since we've been married." If the rumors are indeed false, then this is hardly the most tragic chapter in Ray's life, but there's still a pain to deal with. Rachael Ray has been very vocal about her love of her furry friends, especially her pit bull Isabu, who passed away in 2020. So it's not surprising that she eventually got into the canine culinary game by launching a dog food brand called Rachael Ray Nutrish. Not only does the brand aim to offer nutritional, high-quality products to pooches everywhere, but it also helps fund the Rachael Ray Foundation, as portions from the food sales go to help animals in need. Unfortunately, though, Rachael Ray Nutrish has been hit with lawsuits on multiple occasions. In 2018, a complaint was filed that claimed the brand contained weed killer and shouldn't be promoted as natural. The claim was dismissed at first due to lack of specificity. Then it was amended and refiled before being dismissed yet again.
Rachel's camp says it's the safest food on the market.
Then in 2020, another lawsuit was filed that claimed that testing revealed that some of the brand's food turned up dog DNA as one of the ingredients. There are only 6 ingredients listed on the brand's labels, but the suit alleged that it contained much more than advertised. And yet another lawsuit claimed that the food was potentially harmful to dogs due to false advertising about its health benefits, although this suit was also dismissed. Many celebrity chefs have taken hits to their reputation after accusations of sexual misconduct, and perhaps none more notoriously than Mario Batali. He was one of the food world's most famous and successful figures when multiple women accused him of harassment in 2017. He eventually settled 2 of the cases and was found not guilty in another, and since then he's mostly faded away from public view. Rachael Ray is one of Batali's colleagues and friends, and when she chose to publicly stand up for him, she was unsurprisingly hit with backlash. During a 2019 interview with NPR, Ray admitted that she still spoke with her fellow Food Network star, but that she also hadn't asked him about the accusations. The subject of the #MeToo movement also came up in that interview. As Ray explained, "I think I've always been treated extremely fairly at work, yeah. Do we speak inappropriately in kitchens, men and women? Both of us do. That doesn't mean I'm not super empathetic and supportive of women in the industry that have gone through hell." Ultimately, this was probably a case of Ray being adjacent to tragedy rather than enduring the brunt of the tragedy herself. But it demonstrates how wide-ranging the consequences are when it comes to a pattern of inappropriate behavior. The flip side of a legion of adoring fans is the people who just can't stand you. And Rachael Ray certainly hasn't been immune to this phenomenon, as she's endured more than her fair share of criticism from those who don't exactly agree with her culinary methods. There's even an online blog called Rachael Ray Sucks, but it's not just strangers on the internet who have expressed their ire. It's also some of her colleagues. For example, in a 2009 interview with ABC, Martha Stewart said, "She professed that she cannot bake. She just did a new cookbook which is just a re-edit of a lot of her old recipes."
That's not good enough for me.
Much of this criticism seems to stem from Ray's fast and easy approach to cooking, which is arguably what made her famous in the first place. The late Anthony Bourdain was one of her fiercest critics, as he once told Time magazine, "She genuinely offends me. When Rachel tells you that it's perfectly okay to buy pre-chopped onion from the supermarket, I mean, how hard is it to chop an onion?" And Emeril Lagasse reportedly once said, "She doesn't know anything about food." However, that beef seems like it was eventually quashed, as Lagasse frequently appeared on Ray's talk show. With more than 20 cookbooks to her name, Rachael Ray has published hundreds of recipes. That number might even go into the thousands when you also add up her recipes that have been published online or in magazines. It's probably fair to think that she didn't create every single one of those entirely on her own. But some industry insiders have accused her of much worse. In 2012, the New York Times published a story called "I Was a Cookbook Ghostwriter," which claimed that many celebrity chefs, including Rachael Ray, aren't actually writing their own recipes or cookbooks. Afterwards, Ray responded on an episode of her talk show, "This is how I spend the little time at home I have with my family. I spend in front of these little notebooks, in front of the computer. It sort of takes away from all of that to not be able to call that writing. Of course that's writing. It doesn't mean you don't value the people who write the glossary or that help organize the pantry or that work on a project, but a writer is still a writer." When Rachael Ray was launched as part of the daytime TV lineup, a live audience was a crucial component. However, despite Ray's hard work and endless hours devoted to her shows, some people have claimed that she's not that great a host when the cameras stop rolling. TripAdvisor reviews of the show's taping experience are a mixed bag, with some thoroughly enjoying their time there and others saying things like, "Don't get your hopes up." One unhappy audience member from 2019 even said that she felt sorry for Ray's colleagues while claiming, "She acted like someone who did not want to be there and seemed in a foul mood. For heaven's sake, if it's too much, why continue with your show?" But Ray probably isn't too worried about those negative reviews. Her talk show wrapped up in 2023, and she's gone on to focus on other TV projects, such as Rachael Ray's Rebuild on Hulu. Rachael Ray's Rebuild focuses on people who have experienced a tragedy similar to one that Ray herself experienced: the destruction of her Adirondack home from a fire in 2020. She had helped design and build the home in Lake Luzerne, New York, that ultimately succumbed to a devastating chimney fire.
I ran upstairs to get medicine, my notebooks, my mother's high school ring.
Ray lost many sentimental items in the fire, so when she set out to rebuild, she tried to make the new home as much like the old one as possible. But she ultimately had to make some changes to safeguard against another potential fire, such as adding a tin roof. While this loss was surely emotionally devastating for Ray, she had plenty of opportunities to move forward and look on the bright side of things. In addition to rebuilding this house, she also purchased a home in Tuscany in 2021. As if a massive house fire weren't enough tragedy to deal with, Rachael Ray had another disaster arrive on her doorstep in September 2021 when Hurricane Ida struck New York City. While Ida wasn't quite a technical hurricane when it struck the city, the post-tropical cyclone still broke rainfall records in New York City, causing millions in damage and more than a dozen fatalities. It also damaged more than 3% of the city's buildings, including Ray's apartment. Ray revealed to People magazine that the storm completely wiped out the recently renovated apartment, including the speaker in the ceiling, the fireplace, and all of the seams in the wall. As she put it was like the apartment just literally melted. When a remediation team attempted to assess the issue, they broke a water pipe which flooded the apartment once again, along with the entire building down to the ground level. But by the 2021 holiday season, Ray was back in the apartment for Christmas and showing off her decor on her talk show. Buddy Valastro may be one of the best-known cake bakers on TV, but he's dealt with plenty of adversity throughout his rise to the top. From stress-induced panic attacks to nearly losing his hand, the cake boss is no stranger to hardship. One of the defining setbacks of Buddy Valastro's professional life occurred in September 2020. Around that time, the cake boss shared a photo of himself in a hospital bed with a heavily bandaged forearm. People then published a piece revealing that Valastro's hospital stay was the result of an injury he sustained in a freak accident in his home bowling alley. A representative for Valastro told People, "There was a malfunction with the bowling pin setter, a common fix in the past, but it turned into a terrible accident. After trying to release the bowling pin from the cage mechanism, his right hand became lodged and compressed inside the unit. The pin setter machine fully impaled his hand with a metal rod 3 times. He was only able to free himself once his teenage sons cut through that metal rod with an electric saw. Soon after a surgeon removed the rod from his hand, he had to undergo a second surgery. The cake boss could have lost the use of his hand entirely were it not for that surgery's success. While 2 surgeries in the immediate wake of his accident may have saved Valastro's ability to use his hand, they were merely the start of a long recovery. By the end of 2023, more than 3 years after the injury, the cake boss had undergone 5 hand surgeries in total. After those 5 surgeries, he estimated that he had regained 95% of his ability to move his hand. Even then, it took 1 more surgery to get him back to more or less full hand mobility. That said, Valastro returned to work before his hand was back at full function. In 2021, notably, he filmed Season 3 of Buddy vs. Duff, the cake-baking reality competition show he co-hosts with Charm City Cakes founder Duff Goldman.
My main goal was to be able to see if I could still make cakes to the level that I did. And the fact that I was able to do it was amazing.
The inciting incident behind Valastro's ascent in the culinary industry was having to help run his family's business, Carlo's Bakery, when he was just 17 years old. His father, Bartolo Valastro Sr., had owned the bakery since 1964, but his death in 1994 of lung cancer required surviving family members to step up in his place. Valastro Sr. grew up in Italy before moving to the United States when he was 13. He wound up working at Carlo's Bakery soon after arriving in the US and ended up purchasing the business after a number of years as an employee. Of course, Carlo's Bakery became foundational to the younger Buddy Valastro's success, so he has his dad to thank in part for his career. He wrote in an Instagram post commemorating his late father's birthday, "You're in my thoughts every day, and that's how it will always be. You're up in heaven now, but you'll always be with me." Understandably, running a bakery at just 17 years old in the immediate wake of his father's death wasn't easy for Valastro. Rising to that difficult task meant dropping out of high school so he could dedicate himself to Carlo's Bakery full-time. Valastro's father had him working at Carlo's Bakery when he was just 11. While at that point he was merely on cleaning duty, he started decorating cakes when he was still just 15 years old. 2 years later, Valastro's responsibilities multiplied once his father was no longer at the bakery's helm. He soon started working 18-hour days, 6 days a week, hence dropping out of high school to accommodate the workload. He told CNBC,
And I said, I don't care how hard I have to work. I'll be the first one in every morning, the last one to leave.
It took 3 years after he dropped out of high school to overcome various difficulties, such as competing bakeries and employees worried about losing their jobs, before he felt he had a handle on his new leadership position. Cake Boss fans are well aware of the impact Valastro's mother Mary had on the show during its early run. In an episode that first aired in July 2012, Valastro and his mother revealed her ALS diagnosis to the show's audience for the first time.
Finally, I went to the Mayo Clinic and they said it was ALS. So that was very devastating for me.
She eventually died of the illness in June of 2017. Valastro told People that the final 2 years of his mother's life were particularly difficult because of how severely ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease, had altered her personality. He told the outlet, "It was a mixture of sadness and relief because she wasn't really living at the time. This disease is horrible and it takes a toll on you, and she wasn't that firecracker she always was. I don't want to remember how she was during the last 2 years of her life because that wasn't her." more. In commemoration of his mother and the sizable impact she had on the family business, Valastro temporarily closed every Carlo's Bakery location on June 27, 2017, before reopening them the next day. Valastro may have become accustomed to running Carlo's Bakery around the time he was 20 years old, but that didn't mean the stress of his leadership position suddenly went away. When he was 27, Valastro experienced his first panic attack, and it was so severe he had to check himself into an emergency room. Most likely contributing to that panic attack was the fact that, before he started filming Cake Boss, Valastro worked through weekends and holidays, and his workdays lasted considerably longer than 8 hours. Valastro publicly discusses his experience with panic attacks in episode 6 of his show Bakery Boss, a Cake Boss spinoff. In this episode, the owner of a bakery called Lydia's Bake Shop and Cafe experiences a panic attack while hurriedly trying to bake a batch of cupcakes. Valastro is able to empathize with her based on his personal experience. His hospitalization, of course, was well in his past by the time of this episode's filming, so he had developed personal strategies for mitigating his own stress, allowing him to guide Lydia through her on-camera struggles. Death, divorce, and a bake-off implosion. Here's why Paul Hollywood's rise to TV fame has been anything but easy. If you remember the early seasons of The Great British Bake Off, you'll probably remember that the cast looked very different from how it does now. That's because after 7 series, the show moved from BBC to Channel 4 in the UK, prompting hosts Mel Giedroyc and Sue Perkins to quit. They were shortly followed by Mary Berry. In a statement regarding their departure, Mel and Sue criticized Bake Off's move to a new channel, saying that they had made no secret of their wishes for the show to remain at the BBC. The duo also said, "We're not going with the dough. We wish all the future bakers every success." It was this final statement that seemed to hurt Paul Hollywood, the only member of the original cast who remained with the show after it moved to Channel 4. Hollywood reportedly took the comment as a slight towards him and was left feeling isolated from his former castmates. He quickly found himself facing a significant backlash too, because the move to Channel 4 was so deeply unpopular. Speaking in an interview with the Radio Times, Hollywood said, "I became the most hated man in the country. It's not fun for someone that doesn't like being in the limelight." While The Great British Bake Off has made an international celebrity of Paul Hollywood, fame turned out to be a little bit more than what he signed up for. Hollywood has described himself as an exceptionally private person and has been taken aback by the attention he has received during his stint as a judge on the popular British television show.
Oh, heck. The Hollywood stare. At least Ramsey just swears at you.
He has even admitted that he never wanted to be on television in the first place. Although he loves the job itself, the backlash and public scrutiny that comes with it is much less palatable. He told the Daily Mail, "The other stuff that goes with it is brutal and cut me to my core." Hollywood has previously said that fame has changed him, making him far more insular than he once was, mostly because he hoped to keep a grip on his anonymity. This is especially true when it comes to his family, as he wants to maintain a separation between his private and his public life. If he were to repeat everything, in fact, he has said that he probably wouldn't do Bake Off again. In his Daily Mail interview, he explained, "The financial benefits are great. It's a job, and to earn money you have to work hard. But ultimately what matters is your private life and your anonymity." In 2013, Paul Hollywood's marriage came to a screeching halt, if only for a short while. The celebrity baker and his then-wife, Alexandra, split for several months amid rumors that Hollywood had cheated on her with his American baking competition co-star, Marcela Valladolid. The pair were allegedly seen in Mallorca together while Hollywood and his wife were separated. As rumors circulated about the two TV personalities, Hollywood apparently became deeply broken up about his disintegrating relationship with his wife. While he was devastated when his wife left him, however, he still accepted the blame for the split. He was also saddened by the effect that the situation had on his family, including his young son. In an interview with Platinum magazine, he said, "I was in a really dark place. I didn't want to carry on at one point." The whole situation was also difficult for Alexandra, who told The Independent, "In the space of 4 weeks, my life changed irrevocably. One minute I was happily married and the next I wasn't. It was a complete shock." At the time, Alexandra said that there was no chance of reconciliation with Hollywood. Lucky for him, however, she seemed to have a change of heart as the couple reunited after several months of separation. Tragedy struck Paul Hollywood's family in 2019 when his brother-in-law, Simon Moores, died tragically in a plane crash in Spain. The incident occurred as a result of thick fog, which led Moores' plane to crash into the side of a mountain near Erzurum. Moores was 62. There was also a passenger on the plane, David Hawkins, who also passed away. After the crash, an inquest held in the UK found that there had been little chance of a safe landing in such adverse conditions. It also concluded that there was likely reduced vision when the pair took off, though it is unclear whether Moores and Hawkins were aware of the danger. There were no issues with either the pilot or the plane, meaning that the crash must simply have been a result of the poor weather. Most likely, Moores simply wasn't aware of how close he was to the mountain until it was too late. As if losing a family member to a plane crash wasn't enough, Paul Hollywood also saw the end of his 20-year marriage in 2019. He and Alexandra announced their split in 2017, only 4 years after their previous split, though the divorce wasn't finalized until 2019. In a statement issued in 2017, the couple requested privacy for the sake of their son, who was 13 at the time. In 2022, Alexandra wrote on social media, "My own marriage was too over-seasoned with extramarital affairs for my taste, and so I opted out and chose the single menu instead." This was likely in reference to the cheating rumors that circulated about Hollywood and Alex's split in 2013. While Hollywood has expressed sadness and regret for contributing to their brief split, he also said, "Most of what was being said was a lie or a twisted truth. The truth was very different to what the tabloids were writing." For her part, Alexandra has said of her divorce,
"It's a really difficult thing. It's even more difficult if you're going through it in the public eye."
While he was deeply saddened by his divorce, things have been looking up for Hollywood. In 2023, he got remarried to pub owner Melissa Spaulding. While not much is known about Paul Hollywood's son Josh, the young man and his father recently made headlines, and not in a good way. When Paul Hollywood married his girlfriend Melissa Spaulding in 2023, one very important guest was missing. Many of the celebrity baker's friends attended the wedding, but his son was not in attendance. It seems like Hollywood's relationship with Josh has been strained for a while too. In 2019, a representative for Hollywood's ex-wife Alexandra revealed that the celebrity baker and his son had not seen each other since their split began in 2017. The representative made it seem as though this was Hollywood's choice, insisting that Josh was very saddened by the separation from his father.
Mary Berry might be one of the cheeriest bakers on TV, but not every part of her life has been as sweet as her signature Victoria sponge. In 1948, 13-year-old Mary Berry spent 6 months in the hospital fighting polio. While she didn't need an iron lung, the disease twisted her spine and permanently affected her left side, including her hand. She had to learn to walk again, but she doesn't dwell on the difficulty.
I was only in hospital 6 months, and I've just got a curved spine and a bit of a funny hand.
During her first month in the hospital, she was isolated in a small glassed-in room without knowing why. Her parents could only wave to her from behind the glass. Later, they were allowed to visit her for 1 hour, twice a month. Once, her usually unaffectionate father walked her pony 4 miles so she could pet it from her bed. After living in a hospital full of sick children for so long and watching some of them die, that visit gave her hope that she would eventually be well enough to leave. As a result of her experience, Berry has strong feelings about the polio vaccine. In an interview with Express, she said, "If you're in a hospital like I was, with people in calipers, people in pain, people who weren't going to get better, I think everyone should take the vaccine, not query it, and think of others." Berry married Paul Hunnings when she was 31, later in life than many women of her era. 2 years later, she became pregnant, but later miscarried. In her autobiography, Recipe for Life, she wrote, "I'm thankful that it was an early miscarriage, but it was still very distressing. Paul was hugely sympathetic and did his best to cheer me up, taking me out to restaurants when we couldn't really afford it, but of course he was terribly upset too." Berry had been diagnosed with a bicornuate uterus, a congenital condition which led to a series of 3 miscarriages. She then went to specialist George Pinker, who delivered several royal babies. Ultimately, Berry and her husband had 3 children together, Thomas, Annabelle, and William. Still, looking back, those early failed pregnancies were emotionally difficult for her. In the 1960s, Berry started as the cookery editor for Ideal Home's sister magazine, Housewife. She wrote about all sorts of food-related topics, created recipes, and did her own photography. But in 1968, Housewife folded and merged with Ideal Home without warning. While everyone else working for Housewife was fired, Barry and her assistant moved to Ideal Home. Barry became Ideal Home's cookery editor, while the previous cookery editor was moved to the home section. This former editor resented the transfer and made things difficult for Barry from day one. At first, she insisted that she oversee Barry's work. She even went so far as to tell the editor-in-chief that Barry was missing deadlines. It took 5 years, but the persistent complaints eventually got Barry fired. Her coworkers spoke up about how invaluable she was and tried to get her rehired. But as Barry writes in her autobiography, "I'd had quite enough of the whole nonsense and told them I'm going anyway." Of all the tragedies in Barry's life, the most devastating was the death of her teenage son, William, in January 1989. William was home from school for a weekend visit. He and his sister Annabelle had stayed up the night before, looking through old photographs and reminiscing. The next morning, he asked her to drive with him to get a newspaper he needed for a class. Barry grew anxious when they hadn't returned home for lunch by 1:20 p.m. Then, a policeman arrived with the news that they'd been in an accident.
And he said, William was no longer, and Annabelle's in Wickham Hospital. And I thought, oh no, not two.
William had been fooling around, driving erratically, when he hit a wet spot and flipped the car. While Annabelle had just a few scratches, 19-year-old William died instantly. Barry says in her autobiography, "Once the initial shock subsides, you realize that the bottom has fallen out of your world. I couldn't cook, I struggled to sleep, we lived on soup for a long time, and I ended up losing 1.5 stone. William's death changed her. She became more religious, stopped worrying about the little things, and changed her outlook toward life and death." Barry is a founder patron for Child Bereavement UK, which helps other parents who've lost children. In 2020, Barry's name and face were used in a scam. Customers were buying products on what they thought was Barry's recommendation. Then the company hit their bank accounts with extra charges. 2 companies used her fake endorsement to sell facial lotion and CBD oil. Through computer magic, she appeared in ads, seemingly holding one of the CBD oil bottles in her hand. Barry told the watchdog on BBC's The One Show, "We began to get emails. There's a cream and you recommend it. If you say it's good, we thought it was worth spending the money." I was absolutely shattered. Because the commercials claimed relief from chronic pain, she guessed people believed she used it for arthritis. One of the companies, Bionic Bliss, claimed the ads came from third-party advertisers using third-party marketers and denied overcharging customers. However, one man who signed up for buy one get one free CBD oil for the equivalent of about $69 was charged an additional $150 and $89 with additional fees scheduled for the future. Despite its claims of innocence, Bionic Bliss dissolved in 2020.
On TV, the bow-tie-wearing Christopher Kimball charms audiences with his dry wit and no-nonsense attitude about all things food. But off-screen, Kimball has encountered many personal and professional setbacks. For more than 2 decades, Kimball has served the greater community of foodies, home chefs, and food TV fans with a variety of educational and entertaining media. As a longtime contributor and editor at Cooks Illustrated and a memorable co-host of 2 TV series, Cook's Country and America's Test Kitchen, Kimball earned his position as a tastemaker in the ongoing cultural conversation about food.
My modest proposal is to teach Americans a different way of cooking.
He's also suffered a lot for his art and his livelihood, as numerous personal tragedies and legal battles have infiltrated his life and work. Kimball has been married a total of 3 times. Details regarding his first marriage remain privately held information, except for the fact that it ended with a divorce. In 1987, Kimball married Adrienne Kimball, with whom he fathered 2 children. The Kimballs were together until they formally separated in 2010, with a divorce finalized in 2012. Less than a year after his divorce from Adrienne, Kimball got married again, this time to Melissa Lee Baldino. 25 years Kimball's junior, Baldino worked as an executive producer on his America's Test Kitchen TV and radio series after previously serving as his personal assistant. When Kimball abruptly left America's Test Kitchen and started Christopher Kimball's Milk Street, Baldino joined her husband at the new venture, where she is currently listed as a co-founder and media director. A divorce is an emotionally and legally difficult process for everyone involved. Kimball's split from Adrienne was made all the more complex when she sued the TV host for violating the terms of their divorce agreement. When the couple's split was made official, Kimball agreed to share future earnings with his ex. However, in January 2017, Adrienne filed a lawsuit alleging that her former former spouse broke the agreement they had both signed and that she was owed more than $112,000 across all income streams. In addition to being sued by his ex, Kimball was also forced out of America's Test Kitchen in November 2015. Kimball was ousted by the show's parent company, Boston Common Press. According to an email sent to employees, Kimball would retain his minority ownership in America's Test Kitchen, the company that oversees production of Cook's Illustrated magazine, and the TV shows America's Test Kitchen and Cook's Country. However, he would lose his role as an active participant in its numerous multimedia projects. Internal turmoil began to develop at Boston Common Press in September 2015, according to the Los Angeles Times, after David Nussbaum ascended to the company's CEO position over Kimball. In the end, a disagreement over money led the two sides to part ways. Nussbaum said in a statement on behalf of Boston Common Press, "We made every effort to offer Chris a reasonable contract that reflected his significant contributions to the company, and are disappointed that we could not reach an agreement." 6 months after his sudden departure from America's Test Kitchen and its various print, TV, and online incarnations, Kimball had a new food media empire up and running. In May 2016, he opened Milk Street Kitchen in Boston, which offered a new magazine and a public TV show. That series, Christopher Kimball's Milk Street, was up and running on PBS affiliates by 2017. Milk Street also included a radio program, a system of cooking instructional classes, and a line of cookbooks.
I think what I've learned at Milk Street is there is no such thing as perfect authenticity.
However, the new leaders of America's Test Kitchen filed suit against Milk Street in October 2016, alleging that Kimball and his new media group literally and conceptually ripped off Kimball's former company, according to the New York Times. Following 3 years of legal maneuvering, America's Test Kitchen and Milk Street put the suit to rest in 2019, with Kimball forced to sell his remaining shares in America's Test Kitchen. Meanwhile, Kimball won a different Milk Street-related lawsuit. In 2017, a judge ruled that Kimball's business didn't infringe on the rights of a Boston restaurant called the Milk Street Cafe on account of how the two operate in totally different realms. Secret family members, devastating losses, and a love that surpassed life and death. Who knew Valerie Bertinelli's life was so heartbreaking? Not only did Bertinelli never get to meet her brother, but she didn't even find out she had an older brother until she was a teen. The first tragedy in Bertinelli's life happened on a friend's farm when her mom was pregnant with her. Bertinelli's 17-month-old brother, Mark, wandered off on his own and accidentally ingested a bottle containing a DDT solution. He died as a result. When Bertinelli attended her grandma's funeral years later, she realized that her son was the same age Mark had been when he died. She told People magazine, "I was holding Wolfie, who was 17 months old, and thinking, how did my mom survive? She had to keep going, and I learned that from her. She had to carry on. She had a very hard life. She always tried to make the best of everything." It was love at first sight when Bertinelli met Eddie Van Halen at one of the Rockstar shows in 1980. They married only 8 months later, when Bertinelli was 21 and their son Wolfgang was born in 1991. But while their relationship went on for a decent stretch of time, it wasn't to last forever. Bertinelli and Van Halen were married for 20 years before separating in 2001 and finally divorcing in 2007. While they forgave each other's early infidelities, it was largely Van Halen's drug and alcohol addictions that finally tanked the relationship. Bertinelli admitted she had her faults as well, however. She told Rob Lowe on his podcast Literally that she also took drugs for a few years before she, quote, just couldn't take it anymore. It took the divorce for Van Halen to become sober, which he did the next year. By then, however, it was too late for their marriage, and they both moved on, even though they still loved each other.
I trust him implicitly. I mean, you know, and I can't not. If I don't, then we have nothing.
Infidelity and drugs weren't all to blame for the divorce, however. Bertinelli later told Oprah, "One of the many reasons that Ed and I split up is to give Wolfie a better vision of what two people who are supposedly in love treat each other like. Ed and I weren't treating each other like two people that loved each other, and that's what Wolfie was seeing." The death of Valerie Bertinelli's father was the first in a series of losses that occurred over a short period of time. He died in 2016, the year after Bertinelli last appeared on Hot in Cleveland. Andrew Bertinelli was an Army veteran who spent 32 years working for General Motors after he left the military. After he retired, he did consulting work in England and contributed to the construction of the Channel Tunnel between England and France. Around 2014, Andrew began suffering small heart attacks, which slowed him down tremendously. After one particularly bad episode, his children placed him in an assisted living facility. When Andrew died in 2016, he was 82 years old. His obituary asked for donations to be made in his name to the Translational Genomics Research Institute. The institute researches heart problems among veterans, a cause now dear to the Bertinelli family. Bertinelli's mom, Nancy Bertinelli, died in 2019 at the age of 82. Nancy and Andrew had met when Andrew gave her a ride home from a movie so that she wouldn't have to wait for a bus in the snow. 5 months later, they were married. Nancy was a travel agent and had 5 children and 4 grandchildren. She was responsible for driving Valerie Bertinelli to auditions when she decided she wanted to start acting. However, she also lived half her life with rheumatoid arthritis, an autoimmune disease that affected both her heart and her ability to move around comfortably. After her mom died, Bertinelli told Woman's World, "Soak up what you can. Find out what you can from them. Even if you are angry with them sometimes or they annoy you. Because they are our parents and we're going to be annoyed by our parents." Even though Valerie Bertinelli and Eddie Van Halen's marriage ended in 2007, they always held on to a special love for each other. When Van Halen died from lung cancer in 2020, it affected Bertinelli deeply.
Love always wins, no matter what. Even when they're gone, there's still that love there to be grateful for that you had.
In her book, Enough Already, Bertinelli said that after receiving cancer treatments in Germany in 2019, Van Halen showed up at her house on Thanksgiving to give her a gold bar pendant he'd bought for her. He said, "I hope you don't think it's weird, that I bought my ex-wife this gift and didn't get my wife anything. I just love you." Such was their relationship. Bertinelli and their son Wolfgang stayed with Van Halen during his final week and a half in the hospital, taking shifts with Van Halen's brother and wife. His last words to his ex-wife and child were that he loved them. After his death, Bertinelli wrote on Instagram, "40 years ago, my life changed forever when I met you. You gave me the one true light in my life, our son Wolfgang. I'm so grateful Wolfie and I were able to hold you in your last moments. I will see you in our next life, my love." Some people weren't kind to Bertinelli as she expressed her feelings about her ex-husband and his death on social media. While many were supportive of Bertinelli's grief, others claimed she should have kept quiet as his ex and suggested she was taking attention from Van Halen's widow. Some even thought that Bertinelli's public mourning was just an attention-seeking gimmick. However, other commenters were quick to come to her defense, saying that we can't pretend to understand all the intricacies of other people's long-term relationships. After all, Van Halen and Bertinelli had a relationship that spanned 2/3 of their lives. On this subject, Bertinelli told Today, "Just because we loved each other didn't lessen the love that he had for Janny or me for Tom, so it's a different kind of love." Having lost 3 people in 4 years, it's understandable that Bertinelli put on some weight in the aftermath. As she said herself, she began using food to try to feel better. Unfortunately, some social media users weren't exactly kind about those changes either. About 9 months after her ex-husband's death, Bertinelli was scrolling through some of her old recipes on Instagram to include in her upcoming cookbook. She broke down after coming across a hateful commenter telling her that she needed to lose weight. Bertinelli put out an Instagram video in response.
"If I could lose the weight and keep it off, I would."
As scores of users responded to her video with comments relating their own struggles with body shaming, she asked, "Aren't we tired of body shaming women yet?" Valerie Bertinelli met Tom Vitale in 2004 during her separation from Eddie Van Halen. However, they didn't marry until 2011, 4 years after her first divorce was finalized. But in 2022, 11 years after it began, the Bertinelli-Vitale marriage officially came to an end. Divorce papers said the pair had differences they couldn't work through, but according to Bertinelli, that was a mild version of the real story. One of these problems was verbal abuse.
I have been screamed at so much. I'm told how fat and lazy I am.
Bertinelli said she soon realized that her then-husband was projecting onto her. The problem was that she believed it.
I don't believe it anymore, but it still doesn't stop the feelings from coming up and the hurt.
Bertinelli certainly didn't mind telling the world what Vitaly had done to her. She posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, "You know, there is a difference between talking about a person and talking truth about a person." Due to a prenuptial agreement, Bertinelli had to pay Vitaly $2.2 million after their divorce, but she argued that the price was worth getting out of such a toxic relationship. She even went so far as to celebrate her divorce day by calling it the second best day of her life. She referred to herself as happily divorced on X. Bertinelli has talked about her struggles with body confidence as related to her self-worth. Those issues started back in elementary school and carried on into her teen years on television. As she struggled with weight gain and loss, she eventually became a Jenny Craig diet spokesperson. Years later, in 2021, a commenter on X responded to Bertinelli's new body confidence stance by writing, "You spent decades telling the rest of us to get thin, shilled weight loss shakes, potions, and snake oil, and now want to be a body-shaming warrior? You don't get to be a victim when you helped create the problem." Bertinelli has often been critical of her years of pushing diet culture with Jenny Craig. In response to that post on X, she wrote, "Yes, I spent 6 years shilling for Jenny Craig. I have been buying into the diet industry my whole life, and then I became a part of the problem. So here I am today receiving the karma of my actions." A few years later, Bertinelli wrote an Instagram post in which she reflected further on her body image. Referring to a bikini photo taken a few years before, she said, "This is a 150-pound body on a 5'4" frame. I don't weigh myself anymore because this is considered overweight, by whose standards I don't know. It's stupid, and I believed them for far too long." In 2024, Valerie Bertinelli appeared on the PBS series Finding Your Roots, mostly because she was curious to learn more about her paternal grandfather who grew up in Italy. The first surprise she found out was that her grandfather, Nazareno Bertinelli, married someone who wasn't her grandmother in 1922, only a week before he left Italy for the US. However, Nazareno left his new wife behind and listed himself as single on his immigration paperwork. As it turned out, his Italian wife, Domenica Celerani, had a baby named Ernesto 7 months later, a half-uncle Valerie never knew she had. When Nazareno married Angelina soon after, he listed his marital status as having never been married before. Among her own father's things, Bertinelli found letters that her uncle Ernesto wrote to his American family before he died in 2004. But she doesn't think they ever met. When she learned of her grandfather's secret past, Bertinelli told PBS,
"What I really am doing in earnest right now is to have no judgment, because I don't know what was going on."
Bertinelli added that even though she couldn't be sure whether Nazareno and Domenica had ever been happy together, it was at least something that they'd had a baby who could spread love of his own.
So, that all can't be bad.
As Bertinelli had appeared on Kids Baking Championship since it first began in 2015, she assumed she'd be working there for many more seasons to come. So it came as quite the surprise when she didn't get a callback for the 13th season of the show she loved so much. When People magazine wrote an article claiming that talks negotiating her return to Kids Baking Championship had stalled, she responded on X by saying, "There were never any talks, so no talks could be stalled. I got an inkling I might not be asked back when I saw I was not in the holiday specials. I got a text by a third party on Friday that told me I would not be back. I was basically ghosted." Part of the reason she'd been on the show so long was that she'd had an exclusivity contract with Food Network from 2018 to 2022. Seasons 11 and 12 were shot together in the final year of the contract. Those making the decision about her employment likely assumed they'd have to renew Bertinelli's exclusivity contract for her to continue hosting. At the time, the network was going through layoffs and budget cuts, and so it appeared that this just couldn't happen. Even though she understood the reason was business-related, Bertinelli said in a 2024 Instagram video that the decision was still painful.
I know that it's business. Budget cuts, right? But it really hurt my feelings to know that I'm not going to be asked back.
She also revealed in 2023 that her other Food Network show, Valerie's Home Cooking, had also been canceled.
Giada De Laurentiis barely made it out of cooking school alive after her teacher threw a knife at her, and that's just scratching the surface of the challenges the celebrity chef has faced. Giada De Laurentiis moved to the United States from Italy as a child and experienced some serious culture shock. She told Redbook that she didn't speak any English when she arrived, as the family spoke Italian at home. This made her stand out at school, and not in a good way, as she was relentlessly bullied by other students. Truly, it was horrifying the names they called me, and the teachers never really did a thing to stop it. De Laurentiis credits her cooking skills for helping her finally fit in. She told Redbook, "I'd bring things to class that I'd cooked at home, and my classmates were like, wow, this is amazing, and that girl with the funny name cooked it." It wasn't just her Italian heritage that made her school life difficult, though. She revealed that she was ashamed of her body, something she still occasionally struggles with to this day. "I developed breasts when I was 9 years old, and I was the only one in my class. I would literally sit in class hunched over because I was so embarrassed about my body." De Laurentiis said that motherhood helped her accept herself, as she is trying to be more confident to inspire her daughter. De Laurentiis attended college, but not for cooking. In fact, she originally had a very different career in mind.
I went to UCLA, and I graduated from UCLA as an anthropology major.
Eventually, she decided to abandon that field to pursue her dream of studying professional cooking. She moved to Paris to attend Le Cordon Bleu after finally convincing her parents that it was a good idea. The cooking school wasn't all that De Laurentiis expected it to be, however. Speaking with Time magazine, the chef revealed that her time in Paris was a very lonely, challenging experience. "I hated it for the first 2 months. I was lonely. I had never been away from my family. On top of that, school was exceptionally difficult." De Laurentiis explained that the teachers created a very hostile environment, describing her teachers as evil as she detailed the abuse she suffered at their hands. "They threw stuff at us, sauces, knives. It is a different mentality. They were treating us the way they were treated coming up, and they were letting us have it. Nobody can prepare you for that." Happily for aspiring chefs, De Laurentiis said that the school has definitely improved since then. Tragedy struck the De Laurentiis family when Giada's brother, Dino De Laurentiis, was diagnosed with melanoma at the age of 29. Tragically, the cancer was located on her brother's back, so it took him a very long time to realize anything was wrong. Giada told Entertainment Tonight, "Otherwise, we would have caught it, and he would still be alive today." When Dino died at the age of 31 in 2003, Giada lost the person she could always lean on. Speaking to ET, she explained that even though Dino was 2 years younger than her, it often felt like he was her older brother because she could count on him for absolutely anything. "He was the person I turned to for everything. When something great happened in my life, when something bad happened, I would talk to him 2 to 3 times per day." And while Dino lived with his cancer diagnosis for about 2 years before passing, Giada never really thought that she would lose her brother. She told Parade that she thought that her brother's youth and strength would help him recover. "I didn't actually believe he was going to die. When we actually lost him, I realized nothing can be taken for granted in this life, and you better make the most of every single day." Giada and celebrity chef Bobby Flay met at a food convention in Philadelphia in 2004 and have been friends ever since, give or take a few months. The pair has appeared on several Food Network shows together, competing on Iron Chef America and hosting Food Network Star for 10 seasons. De Laurentiis said that Flay is one of those people that if you are his friend, he has your back forever, and he will stand up for you. Still, even the closest friendship can hit rocky waters, and for De Laurentiis and Flay, it was a TV show that sparked their one big falling out. In 2006, the two teamed up to compete against Mario Batali and Food Network chef Rachel Ray on Iron Chef America. Unfortunately, the De Laurentiis Flay team lost, and De Laurentiis took the loss hard. She was so upset, in fact, that she did not speak to Flay for 8 months afterward. She told the Beyond the Plate podcast, "We lost, and he thought it was funny." De Laurentiis explained that she took the competition very seriously and felt that Flay did not respect her attitude, treating the competition as somewhat of a joke and being what she termed a jerk. He didn't say, "Hey, I'm sorry that we lost," or "Hey, you know we'll do it again." Giada has made a successful career as a TV personality on the Food Network, and that has made her the target of tabloid rumors. The chef was accused of cheating on her now ex-husband, Todd Thompson, multiple times, including alleged affairs with John Mayer, Bobby Flay, and Matt Lauer. In one, De Laurentiis was accused of cheating on her husband with her longtime friend and Food Network co-star Bobby Flay. Flay's representatives responded to the accusations by saying that the two colleagues and old friends had a quick dinner and nothing more. In 2011, De Laurentiis was also accused of being intimate with her friend and coworker Matt Lauer, who was fired from his NBC News gig in 2017 following allegations of inappropriate sexual behavior in the workplace. De Laurentiis and Lauer went on vacation and out to dinner together, and fans noticed that they shared a particularly flirty chemistry when they appeared on The Today Show together. De Laurentiis vehemently denied all claims of any wrongdoing on her part, telling Page Six at the time, My longtime friendships with my coworkers Matt Lauer and Bobby Flay are exactly that, longtime friendships.
A Today rep told Fox 411 that the story is false, period. There you have it, kids.
Perhaps the most difficult rumors of infidelity happened in 2010 when Star magazine accused De Laurentiis of having a steamy hookup with John Mayer. Both parties vehemently denied the claims, with De Laurentiis telling Redbook magazine that she was shocked and her husband was embarrassed. Of her interaction with Mayer, she said, "Maybe we chatted for 5 minutes, but I wouldn't consider that intimate. The only things that could possibly have tied us together is that we were at the same hotel that weekend in question, which, by the way, my husband was with me there as well." What made the accusations even worse was the timing. Her beloved grandfather, the legendary film producer Dino De Laurentiis, died just 1 day after the rumors hit the tabloids. De Laurentiis also opened up about losing her grandfather with Redbook magazine, saying, "Anytime any of us had a question, we would always call him first. I saw him nearly every weekend for the last year. He really wanted his family around. He loved to sit and chat with us." The celebrity chef has long talked about her close relationship with her grandfather, to whom she credits in part her career in food. She told she knows that some of her formative memories come from cooking with her grandfather. "We'd each make our own pizzas, and I think, for me, that was the beginning of my love for food." Giada started dating her future husband, Todd Thompson, in 1990 when she was only 19 years old. Their relationship withstood a lot, including De Laurentiis attending college and culinary school and having her first big break on the Food Network. Before the couple was even married, they finally tied the knot in 2003 and welcomed daughter Jade in 2008. But in 2015, after 11 years of marriage and 25 years together as a couple, the pair ended up divorcing. In a statement on Facebook, De Laurentiis announced her split from Thompson, writing, "Although our decision to separate comes with a great deal of sadness, our focus on the future and overwhelming desire for our family's happiness has given us the strength to move forward on separate yet always connected paths." Although the exact reason for their divorce is unknown, many have speculated that it has something to do with De Laurentiis' busy work schedule, or even with Thompson feeling overshadowed by his wife. In an interview with Redbook magazine in 2011, De Laurentiis said, "I think it can be hard for any man to sometimes be upstaged by his wife." While De Laurentiis adamantly insists that any rumors about her affairs are false, the strain they put on her family cannot have been negligible. Still, despite the challenges of navigating separate paths, the pair remains committed to co-parenting, and ensuring their daughter Jade's happiness remains a priority. And De Laurentiis has said the divorce reminded her who she is.
Over time, you forget. You just get busy in your daily life, and we forget who we are.
Being a celebrity always means being the subject of public scrutiny, and De Laurentiis is no exception. The chef has been the victim of some particularly bitter internet hate, a sad callback to the childhood bullying she endured. One instance of this vitriol happened when De Laurentiis posted a photo of herself enjoying a pasta dish in Italy, wearing a huge, toothy smile. Comments from haters flooded in from everywhere mocking her teeth. According to Delish, people wrote remarks like, "I had to count my teeths. Apparently I'm missing 1,000. Luckily, fans rushed to De Laurentiis' defense, posting supportive comments such as, "Why do people feel the need to slander this woman? Amazing and talented chef who brings such relaxing and beautiful food to our lives. Let her be." Another instance of hate for the Food Network chef occurred when her show replaced fellow Food Network chef Paula Deen's show. Deen was dropped by the Food Network after controversy over the celebrity chef using a racial slur. Fans of Deen's took to the internet to attack De Laurentiis, saying that the chef should come to Deen's defense. De Laurentiis did not initially get involved, but eventually was forced to comment on the matter, saying, "Her shows got replaced by my shows, so we have a lot of people not happy with me right now, as if I had anything to do with it."
Jamie Oliver is one of the most likable chefs on television. But when he decided to try and tackle childhood obesity by changing school lunches, he set off a firestorm of controversy that's still going today. The schoolyard is a tough place, as kids can be mean. Jamie Oliver told Flow magazine that he didn't make it out of his all-boys school unscathed, saying, "I was a chubby, thick kid who was so bad at school I needed extra lessons for the simplest things." Oliver was diagnosed with dyslexia in primary school and had to attend a special needs class for 5 years, as it affected his ability to read and write. At that time, the special needs class was where all students who were struggling at school were thrown together, including those with severe physical disabilities. As a result, Oliver revealed that he was regularly targeted by bullies. His one safe haven was his parents' pub, where he began peeling vegetables and washing dishes for pocket money at age 5. Oliver told the Sunday Times, "My North Star has always been the pub." Sadly, in 2020, Oliver's parents, Trevor and Sally, sold the pub and retired after 44 years in business. Oliver was reportedly quite upset at the loss of his family's pub. Oliver had high hopes for his restaurant franchise Jamie's Italian, which he opened in 2008. He wanted to bring an elevated experience to diners via high-quality ingredients and mouth-watering Mediterranean cuisine, all of which wasn't at the expense of any animal's welfare and wouldn't be too pricey. And for a while, his brand was flying high, eventually expanding to 42 Jamie's Italian locations alone. But by 2017, the chain was in trouble, with multiple locations closing, and in 2019, everything came crashing down. Oliver was forced to close 22 of his 25 remaining restaurants, including the grill-focused Barbacoa and his social enterprise restaurant 15, along with numerous Jamie's Italian locations across the UK. One former location manager told the BBC that they, quote, grew too big and tried to do too much. Oliver apparently lost a small fortune trying to keep his chain afloat, as between 2017 and 2019, he reportedly injected an estimated $23.1 million into the enterprise to keep things afloat. But it wasn't enough, and over 1,000 people lost their jobs when the restaurants went under. Oliver told the Young Again podcast, "It was utterly painful, and it was something I'd never, ever, ever like to do again."
To survive in this industry is really tough.
In 2010, Jamie Oliver was the second biggest selling author in the UK after J.K. Rowling. The celebrated cook had become a celebrated author. In fact, Oliver has published a book a year for the past 25 years, which is an incredible feat for someone with dyslexia.
There's different types of intelligence, and everyone has their ability to be brilliant.
But how does someone who struggles with dyslexia write so many cookbooks? It turns out that Oliver doesn't put pen to paper or type it out on a laptop. Instead, he dictates his books. And it works. Oliver is currently the top-selling non-fiction author in UK history, and he hasn't stopped with cookbooks. In 2023, he released his first children's book, Billy and the Giant Adventure. Over the years, Oliver has suffered a number of losses, both personal and professional. In 2019, John Hamilton, who had worked closely with Oliver on a number of cookbooks, passed away at the age of 55. Oliver wrote on Facebook, "What a sad, sad loss. He was a great, true friend to me." Jamie also lost another colleague when MasterChef Australia judge Jock Zonfrillo died in 2023. Zonfrillo passed away shortly before the premiere of the show's 15th season, which featured Oliver as a guest in the first episode. Oliver wrote on Instagram, "I'm in total shock to wake up to the sudden death of chef Jock Zonfrillo. Jock was very generous to me with his time and spirit in the show, and for that I was really grateful."
Jock was very good at being sort of stern, strict, funny and kind and vulnerable. It's an incredible cocktail.
On a personal level, Oliver also mourned the loss of both his grandmothers. His maternal grandmother, Betty Palmer, passed away in 2013, while his paternal grandmother, Hazel Oliver, died in 2018. Jamie wrote on Instagram, "My memories of her are so precious and full of love. She always had time for everyone." Tragically, Oliver has also had to deal with an even more personal loss. Oliver and his wife Jules married in the year 2000 and have 5 beautiful children. Yet sadly, they have also suffered 5 miscarriages. During her second miscarriage, Jules came very close to losing her life and says she still has post-traumatic stress from the experience. During an appearance on the Life and Soul podcast, she revealed, "I didn't even really tell Jamie I was pregnant at points, as I was worried he'd think, why are we going through this all again?" Oliver's wife also referenced the couple's journey through pregnancy loss in an Instagram post celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. "We have created 5 wonderful children and lost our 5 little stars in the sky. Thank you for loving me the way you do." Oliver has had a number of high-profile controversies, including multiple instances where he was accused of misrepresenting or appropriating cultural cuisine. In 2015, Oliver shared a recipe on X, formerly known as Twitter, that he called a paella, writing, "Good Spanish food doesn't get much better." However, Oliver included chorizo in the dish, which, while common in Spanish cuisine, is not a traditional paella ingredient. The signature Valencian recipe usually includes rabbit instead. Critics took to social media to complain, even calling out Oliver for using the wrong kind of pan. Oliver stepped in it again when he decided to share his reimagined take on jollof rice, a West African dish that's among the continent's most iconic foods. But many declared that it was too far off the mark, as he'd added coriander, parsley, and lemon wedges to the simple dish. One angry fan tweeted, "Our plates will not be colonized." Food blogger Azoz Soko said jollof rice is integral to West African culture. At home and in the diaspora, we will take up arms to defend anything and everything about it. Its origin, preparation, and by God, how it is served. Oliver's misadventures in international cuisine weren't the first time he's gotten in hot water. Far from it, in fact. In 2005, Oliver launched a campaign for healthier food in schools, beginning with his TV miniseries, Jamie's School Dinners. The effort was driven by his desire to end childhood obesity and improve children's diets. But despite his noble intentions, the campaign was met with considerable hostility from various quarters. Parents, in particular, were divided. While many supported the initiative, others felt that Oliver was unfairly imposing his views on their children's eating habits. These critics resented the idea of being told what was best for their families. In some cases, parents even protested by passing junk food through school gates, arguing that their children had the right to choose what they ate. Some school staff also expressed resistance. The shift to healthier menus required changes in food orders, increased costs, and often meant retraining for kitchen staff. These changes were met with frustration, especially in underfunded schools where resources were already stretched thin. Some educators also worried that the new, healthier meals would be unpopular with students, leading to increased food waste and lower meal participation rates. Politicians and policymakers also weighed in on the controversy too. While some applauded Oliver's efforts, others criticised his approach as overly simplistic and out of touch with the financial difficulties facing many families and schools. Still, Oliver's campaign sparked a conversation about nutrition and set the stage for reforms in some school meal programs. Oliver catapulted to fame in 1999 with the debut of his hit series, The Naked Chef. He's been called confident, outspoken, and charismatic, and he clearly doesn't shy away from the limelight. He uses his fame to launch his latest ideas and projects, which inevitably means more controversy. In 2022, Oliver sparked anger with another push for healthier eating habits when he supported a ban for buy one get one free deals on junk food. Critics blasted him for being out of touch with the financial hardships faced by disadvantaged communities. 3 years earlier, critics called him hypocritical when Oliver, an outspoken environmentalist, teamed up with big oil company Shell to stock healthy snacks in their grocery stores. And back in 2008, Oliver debuted a new TV miniseries called Jamie's Ministry of Food. The idea of the show was that Oliver would teach regular folks how to cook, skills which they could pass on to their family members to create healthier eating habits. However, some critics felt the show was punching down by portraying the working-class subjects of Oliver's ministrations in a negative light. Some good came of it though, as Oliver ultimately created a nationwide outreach organisation to teach cooking skills to local communities, which is still running today. Though Oliver has long advocated for healthy eating and living, sadly he hasn't always enjoyed good health himself, in part because of his hectic, workaholic lifestyle. At the end of 2014, just before he turned 40, Oliver told the Mail on Sunday that he was only getting 3.5 hours of sleep a night, and it had been like that for the past decade. He shared that he'd been ignoring the issue, but it was getting out of hand, so he had to make significant life changes in order to foster healthy sleep habits. To help him sleep, Oliver sets an alarm to go to bed by 10 p.m. and controls the ambience in his bedroom, ensuring the room is cool, using light-blocking curtains, and keeping an eye mask handy. He said, "On a very fundamental level, I wasn't happy and I wasn't functioning like a normal person." Oliver also has suffered from a number of back issues over the years, including slipped spinal discs as he prioritised work over health. Ultimately, he had to make more changes to his lifestyle in order to get healthier. He told the Sunday Times, "My job doesn't allow me not to work. If I stop, this whole thing falls apart. I've had weeks where I've been able to stand for only 40 seconds at a time. Now, if I get a sniff of it, I'm straight to see my doctor."
Carla Hall is a force in food culture. More importantly, she stayed centered and positive in the face of adversity. Here are some of the tragic details that have helped make Hall who she is today. Carla Hall grew up middle class in Nashville, Tennessee, but her early home life had its troubles. Despite the fact that she's a very family-oriented person, Hall doesn't speak about her father, George Morris Hall, very often. She has disclosed that he was an alcoholic and that his battle with addiction is the reason why she doesn't drink. Hall's father also had a history of domestic violence, inflicting abuse on her mother, Audrey. Her parents divorced, then remarried when Hall was young. By the time she was 7, they were divorced for a second time. Still, not all of Hall's recollections of her father are tragic. Sitting with her parents and sister at the dinner table are among her earliest childhood memories. Her father would discuss music and psychology, and Hall says she inherited her comedic timing from him. George Morris Hall died several years ago. One of the last memories Hall has of her father is sitting down together for soul food in Nashville. In a 2018 interview with Garden & Gun, Hall said, "Theater saved me from being bullied because I was a quirky kid and really shy. From age 11, Hall's passion was acting. She attended Nashville Academy Theater Camp every summer and took acting classes in high school. But when her application to Boston University School of Theater was deferred, Hall lost her way. She enrolled at Washington, D.C.'s Howard University, where her sister was a student. There, she majored in accounting on the principle that she had liked her high school accounting teacher and enjoyed working with numbers. But 2 years as an accountant at Price Waterhouse sent Hall into an existential crisis. She followed a group of young women to Paris in the late 80s, where she pursued modeling. In Paris, Hall and other black models would have Sunday suppers at the home of a woman named Elaine Evans. Hall listened to the other models talk about cooking, something she knew nothing about.
I think the most shocking thing about that is that models actually eat. I saw them! Yeah.
But before leaving Europe, she began to buy cookbooks and make meals for friends. She told Garden & Gun, "Paris ended up being the bridge between what I knew I didn't want to do and what I eventually wanted to do."
She's gonna be a star.
She returned to Washington, D.C. with the beginnings of her culinary career in the works. Many of Hall's memories are centered around Sunday suppers at her maternal grandmother's house. From her kitchen in Lebanon, Tennessee, Freddie My Price Glover, better known to Hall as Granny, prepared post-church soul food feasts of smothered pork chops, mac and cheese, collard greens from the garden, candied sweet potatoes, and cast iron cornbread.
I just looked at her and waited until she poured those pork chops on the serving platter, and oh my God.
It was Granny who showed Hall the importance of cooking with love. It was what she always did, until Alzheimer's disease took her from the kitchen and eventually claimed her life at the age of 96. Granny suppers remain at the heart of Hall's connection with food. But when she was young, Hall loved eating more than cooking and would often be found playing outside while Granny worked her magic in the kitchen. One of the first signs that Granny was losing her memory was seen in her signature dishes. In a 2022 speech to the Alzheimer's Association, Hall remembered, "We all loved her macaroni and cheese so much that she served it every Sunday. There was one point when she served us macaroni noodles and milk. There was no cheese. It wasn't baked." Her disease progressed to the point that she no longer remembered family, but Hall recalled, "Touching her hands was powerful. If I close my eyes, I can feel her hands right now." For 3 years, Hall modeled in Paris and London, but in 1991, she was lured home by a newfound interest in cooking. When she catered her sister's baby shower with homemade smoked turkey, buttermilk biscuits, sandwiches, and chess pie, she promised to bring leftovers to a friend, only there weren't any.
Guess what? I break my turkey down like a chicken. Yeah, just like a chicken.
So she remade the food the following day and brought it to the doctor's office where her friend worked. The other employees were so impressed that they asked Hall for prices so they could order lunch from her every day. Hall made up her pricing on the spot, naming her company Lunch Basket after the picnic basket she packed the food in. From there, she went door to door in the Washington, D.C. area, gradually building up her clientele. She reportedly didn't take a single day off for the next 5 years. As business picked up, she began delivering food in an old mail truck. 5 years in, Hall felt that her food would be even better if she went to culinary school. So at the age of 30, she enrolled at Maryland's L'Académie de Cuisine. In the wake of the unrest surrounding George Floyd's death in 2020, Hall opened up about a brush with police brutality in the mid-90s. She was driving home from a work engagement in D.C. when she coasted through a red light and was pulled over. Hall handed her license and registration to the officer, but was told to step out of her vehicle because her documents were expired. In disbelief, Hall found herself handcuffed and pressed against the trunk of her car as several other police cars arrived. As her fear mounted, a female officer advised that it wouldn't end well for Hall if she didn't stay calm. She was taken to a police station in handcuffs and eventually released. In speaking about this traumatic experience, Hall wanted to illuminate the dangers of racial profiling, telling ABC 7 News, "Sometimes I think I'm seen as Carla, but not really a black woman. I think sometimes I want to say that if you don't see my color, see my culture." Between attending culinary school and her catering business, Hall didn't have time for love. Then she met Matthew Lyons on an internet dating site, and just 9 months later, they were married.
When he found me was the first day that I actually had gone onto Match.com.
Just before their wedding, Hall became pregnant, but she had a miscarriage about 8 weeks into the pregnancy. Her immediate reaction was acceptance. Hall was in her 40s and hadn't planned the pregnancy, so she took the loss as a sign from the universe. She admits now that it might seem insensitive, but she simply asked the doctor what she needed to do in order to go to work and move on. Hall has no biological children, but is a stepmother to Lyons' son from a previous relationship. Season 5 of Top Chef was Hall's to lose, and lose she did. When the season finale kicked off, 3 contestants remained: Stefan Richter, Hosea Rosenberg, and Hall. Hall's cook with love strategy paid off until a major mistake cost her the whole competition.
My strategy is to incorporate big flavors, comfort food, exciting but still a little refined.
When the sous chefs were announced for the final meal, Hall was paired with Season 3's Casey Thompson. While menu planning, Thompson pushed for using the sous vide method to cook New York strip steak and swapping a blue cheese souffle for the cheese tart Hall originally envisioned.
That you let your sous chef talk you out of cooking the food that got you to the finale, and I'm not quite sure I understand that.
Right.
The changes made for major flaws in Hall's meal. Hall was teary-eyed as she acknowledged where it all went wrong, and Rosenberg became top chef. Fresh off her appearance on Season 8 of Top Chef All-Stars, Hall signed on as a co-host of ABC's The Chew, an hour-long show all about food which debuted in 2011. But she didn't feel deserving of the opportunity at first. The learning curve was so intimidating, it gave her stomach pains and caused her to go home crying.
Imagine having a job and thinking every day that you're going to get fired.
She lived with that fear of being fired until she saw a sidekick who advised her that she would be on the show for 5 more years. A similar surge of imposter syndrome flared up while writing her first cookbook, 2012's Cooking with Love, Comfort Food That Hugs You. Hall's lack of confidence caused her to overcompensate. Hall made some of the recipes in her first cookbook extra complicated in order to prove her command of the kitchen, but it was Hall's refreshing brand of authenticity that made her famous in the first place. Initially, The Chew wasn't well received, but as time went on, the hosts got into a groove and Hall's effervescent personality shone through.
It probably seems like I drink a lot of caffeine, which I do not.
At its peak, the show amassed 3 million daily viewers. The Chew won Emmy Awards for Outstanding Informative Talk Show Host in 2015 and Outstanding Talk Show/Informative in 2016.
Here she is. This is for the best host. And yeah, it's kind of heavy.
But in 2017, co-host Mario Batali left amidst a flurry of sexual misconduct allegations that put an end to his celebrity chef career. And just 1 year later, after 7 seasons and 1,500 episodes, ABC gave The Chew the axe. Shocked by the decision, Hall suddenly found herself out of a day job. Black female chefs have never gotten the visibility they deserve. Hall has been instrumental in changing that, but even after achieving celebrity chef status, she's had to battle prejudice. For instance, Hall's salary for The Chew was 1/5 of what the male host made. She initially believed it was because she had less experience. However, she wasn't able to renegotiate her contract until the show's final season. In fact, Hall was only offered more fair compensation once the show was on the verge of cancellation. Perhaps more surprising was Hall having to defend her 2018 cookbook, Carla Hall's Soul Food, every day in celebration to her own team. Their insinuations that a soul food cookbook might alienate her white fan base didn't go over well.
I am going to reclaim soul food because I really love being Black. I love everything that we have contributed to this cuisine.
Speaking to The Hollywood Reporter in 2020, Hall said, "You don't say that to people who are Italian or Greek or Chinese or Indian, so why would you say that to me when I want to share my food? Why would soul food be for one group?" For Hall, opening a Southern restaurant in Brooklyn really seemed like a great idea. At the time, she was filming The Chew in New York, and it goes without saying that Hall and soul food are a match made in gastronomical heaven. Carla Hall's Southern Kitchen opened in Brooklyn's Columbia Street waterfront district in 2016. A year later, it closed. How could Hall, a hardworking chef and lovable television personality, shutter her first restaurant so quickly? The answer, at least partly, was lack of know-how.
Hooty-hoo, Kickstarters!
She used a Kickstarter campaign to raise money for the restaurant, which caused some to scoff at the idea of such a high-profile chef resorting to public funding. Also, the Kickstarter and actual opening were nearly 2 years apart, prompting more than a few funders to grow suspicious.
I could not predict how long it would take to actually find a space.
The food at Southern Kitchen was one of its few saving graces, yet an overfixation on branding, its outer borough location, and inexperienced staff hurt the business. 2 months in, there was an electrical fire and the walk-in fridge had to be replaced twice. What's more, Hall's commitment to The Chew didn't allow her enough time at the restaurant. All in all, a recipe for disaster. Hall has spent much of her culinary career and beyond connecting to her roots and seeking out information about her ancestral history. When she took a test from 23andMe, a biotechnology company that uses genotyping to provide insight on genetic health and heritage, the genetic testing panel detected a predisposition to late-onset Alzheimer's disease. Hall wasn't exactly surprised. Her maternal grandmother died from the condition at 96, and Hall's mother was diagnosed with early dementia. Not one to come undone by a bout of bad news, Hall has embraced a series of preventative measures to help help offset the risk of developing Alzheimer's. Her current wellness routine includes walking and working out with light weights 3 to 5 times a week, as dementia-related studies show that light exercise is beneficial to brain health. She's cut back on sugar, no easy feat for a judge on Food Network's Halloween Baking Championship, and is incorporating more whole grains and protein into her diet. In an interview with Marie Claire in 2024, Hall declared, "I want to live until I'm 104, specifically because my great-grandmother passed away at 103, and I want to beat her." Ace of Cake star Duff Goldman seemingly had it all until a drunk driver nearly cost him everything, including his life. Goldman is an avid motorcyclist, a hobby that got its start when he designed and baked a cake in the shape of a motorcycle. As part of the project, the dealership that commissioned the confection gave Goldman an actual motorcycle. With a high-performance bike in his garage, the TV chef took it upon himself to learn how to ride. In 2014, Goldman told Us Weekly, "I love motorcycles, they're part of my soul." In 2012, Goldman suffered a brutal crash on his bike that cost him a few toes. According to Goldman, his family and friends all made him swear to give up the hobby after the accident, but he just couldn't stay away, and it led to a newfound appreciation for life. "There was about an 8-month period where I didn't ride bikes, and every time I would see a bike go by, I was like, I can't do it anymore." Ultimately, Goldman said he came to terms with the fact that life is precious and decided that the joy of riding was worth the risk. "It didn't scare me, it just made me make the choice to say, I'm doing something that is very dangerous, but it's something I love." The motorcycle accident was scary enough, but it wasn't the worst accident Goldman has been involved with. In 2024, Goldman revealed on his Instagram page that he was involved in a serious accident that left him with significant injuries to his right hand that he feared could impact his baking career. He wrote, "On my way home from the airport, I was thinking about what kind of cake I was going to make for my daughter's birthday. Next thing I knew, I was bleeding and surrounded by airbags. A drunk driver had swerved into my lane on a windy country road."
Losing function in this, that would be terrifying.
Goldman said he felt lucky to walk away, but it was a scary incident that should never have happened. "It's going to be a long road to recovery, and for someone like me who makes a living with my hands, you can imagine that this is no joke. There's no excuse for driving drunk. None." Known for his big smile and effortless enthusiasm, Goldman is also recognized for his large frame, and his weight is something that he's found challenging for years. In 2018, he told Bicycling.com, "I've struggled with weight since college. I sometimes have to try 24 desserts a day." Goldman revealed that things changed when he took up bicycling as a hobby, though it wasn't easy. The first time he tried, he gave up after 2 weeks, but he decided to give it another try. The following year, "I got a Giant Defy brand road bike and started training more seriously. It got to be fun to see how far I could go. When I rode the 50 miles to Palos Verdes and back, it was an incredible feeling." Within a few years, Goldman had shed almost 30 pounds, which he attributed to simple exercise and eating better. "I'll never not love cake. I love cake, but with riding, everything pushes everything else. Eating cleaner and feeling better makes me ride more because it feels good." Emotional trauma sustained during childhood has the potential to affect a person in ways they don't expect as they get older. When Goldman was a child, his parents divorced, leaving scars that took decades to heal. He told People magazine that it soured him on the entire concept of marriage. "My parents had a really nasty divorce. I was like, cool, I don't ever want any of that, so I'm not getting married. I was just like, I'm not into it." That changed when he met Jonna Colbury. The two fell in love in 2016 and did indeed get married 3 years later. In 2021, they welcomed their first child. A career in the kitchen isn't for the faint of heart. Whether it's ruining an elaborate dish by misjudging an ingredient or slipping and falling in a puddle of grease, the back of the house isn't a place for prying eyes, as even the most experienced chefs have probably been involved in a few blunders over the years. In an Us Weekly interview, Duff Goldman talked about what had to be his most cringe-inducing incident in the kitchen that happened when he was working for another chef earlier in his career. "My most embarrassing moment was when I got pantsed in an open kitchen with no underwear on. The whole dining room saw it, and by it, you know what I mean." Unfortunately, Goldman wasn't even in a position to fix his malfunctioning wardrobe because he was too busy baking. "The chef was yelling at me to pull my pants up, and I told him that I didn't pull them down, so he made the cook that did it pull my pants up."
My dignity has been gone for years.
It can be easy to imagine that a celebrity and TV personality like Duff Goldman lives an easy, pleasure-filled life devoid of real problems. Nevertheless, even the rich and famous have their personal issues, and for Goldman, it's a struggle with self-doubt and anxiety that has plagued him all his life. And surprisingly, it got even worse after Ace of Cakes became a huge hit. He explained on Imposters with Alex Lieberman, your insecurities, your anxieties, your fears, all the things that make you do all the dumb things you do, everybody has them. Goldman revealed that he frequently psychs himself up before big public events by reminding himself that those insecurities are indeed universal and they help us survive. He also revealed that he lifts weights to relax. I do a lot of different things, but I love to lift heavy things. Putting on music and lifting is great. Goldman told the Sporkful podcast that while the anxiety never goes away, these coping mechanisms help him handle it. I'm still terrified of stuff. The thing is that you never stopped being terrified because you're still doing stupid stuff, but you learn how to deal with it. Goldman nearly lost it all before he catapulted to fame on the Food Network. Early in his career, he'd taken a prestigious gig at the French Laundry, a 3-Michelin star restaurant in Los Angeles, and he equated getting hired there to getting admitted to Harvard. Sadly, it wasn't a good experience because it stifled his creativity. He said on the Sporkful podcast, "One thing I learned is that kind of environment is not a very good fit for me. I mean, you can probably imagine that would be a square peg in a round hole, right?" Following a crisis of faith about his career, Goldman found himself at a crossroads and walked away. Left with nothing, he got a job baking bread at a hotel before briefly quitting baking altogether to become a musician. There, he found some success, even playing with the legendary Maryland outfit Clutch, for whom he later baked a celebratory cake on Ace of Cakes. But he couldn't get baking out of his bones, making cakes on the side to pay the bills.
So here's the thing. I actually started decorating cakes because I was trying to be a full-time musician.
After getting a gig as a personal chef, he finally decided it was time to take a chance on himself, even though it was terrifying. Goldman added, "When I quit my job as a personal chef and I woke up the next day, I had no paycheck. I had enough money in my bank account that I could pay my bills for about 2 months if I didn't sell a single cake. I was like, all right, I got 2 months to start making money. You just don't have a choice. I don't have a choice. I have to succeed." Thankfully, Goldman was able to make ends meet by making cakes, and before long, had started his own bakery, Charm City Cakes, and the rest is history. In 2017, Duff Goldman wrote a scathing op-ed for People, criticizing the infamous incident in which a baker refused to make a cake for a gay wedding, leading to widespread backlash. He staunchly supported the customers who were suing the bakery at the time, a tolerant attitude which may stem from dealing with anti-Semitism as a young Jewish person growing up in Baltimore. In a discussion with the Cornell Daily Sun, Goldman spoke about how he endured anti-Semitism in school, and that the problem only got worse with his growing fame and the rise of social media. He said that in his school days, he'd often get into fights with bigoted bullies, but that he has different and more peaceful ways of dealing with the problem today. When you approach it with a little bit of humor and gently teach people, sometimes people listen. Duff Goldman graduated from the University of Maryland with multiple degrees, but nothing related to his future occupation as a baker. Instead, he earned degrees in history and philosophy before he enrolled in the Culinary Institute of America. In 2002, he founded Charm City Cakes, and 4 years later, he was given his own TV show on the Food Network about the day-to-day challenges in his bakery, Ace of Cakes. However, fame and fortune aren't always what they're cracked up to be, and for Goldman, they created new and unexpected problems. For starters, the perception customers had of him and his bakery began to change now that he was at the center of a reality TV show, and with his success came imitators like Cake Boss. Customers began seeing cakes as part of pop culture, and they didn't just want a special treat, but an elaborate project like on their favorite episodes. Goldman told Huffington Post, "Cake decorating TV was getting pretty saturated, and Charm City Cakes was getting painted with the same brush that other TV bakeries were. We were getting pigeonholed into doing one kind of cake, the crazy ones with lights and motors and stuff, which I love, they're great, but we do a lot of wedding cakes and people just forgot that."
As a popular TV chef and cookbook author, Sandra Lee seems to have it all. But when the cameras are off, the Food Network star has dealt with everything from an abusive childhood to serious health issues. It's safe to say that Sandra Lee experienced a very disjointed home life as a child. Lee's biological parents, Vicky Svitak and Wayne Waldrop, had been a couple in high school. After welcoming daughters Sandra and Cindy in the 1960s, they decided to get married. When she was around 2 years old, she was sent to live with her father's mother, Lorraine. In her memoir, Made from Scratch, Lee wrote, "I started calling Grandma Lorraine Mommy, and Vicky became a distant memory." A relatively happy period would follow. In her memoir, Lee said this about her grandmother, "Some of my fondest memories are of baking with her." Then, shortly after she turned 6, Lee witnessed the return of her mother along with her mother's new husband, Richard. Lee went to live with them in what became a traumatic shift that was difficult for a young Lee to understand. She wrote in her memoir, "Vicky and Richard tried to explain that they were our mom and dad, but I wondered why these strangers wanted to take us away." After Lee was reunited with her mother, her family grew with the addition of 3 half-siblings. The family lived in California, where her stepfather worked as a computer programmer. However, after Richard's job forced him to move the family to Washington State, Lee's mother began struggling with her mental health. Lee wrote in her memoir, "Vicky's mood was becoming unpredictable and more volatile." 3 years after the move, Richard left his wife, 3 biological children, and 2 stepchildren. However, Lee's mother didn't step in to head up the household. Lee wrote, "Vicky spent her days lying on the couch, taking pills and screaming at us." So at 11 years old, Lee became a parental figure to her 4 younger siblings. She became responsible for all of the housework, cooking, and household finances, stretching what little money her family had with lessons she learned from her grandmother. Lee wrote in her memoir, "I was so glad Grandma had taught me how to cook and be frugal, because there was no other way for us to make it through."
I started from welfare and food stamps, in debt, with no parental guidance. You have to look at those things and say, how does this work for me?
Since she was left to feed and take care of a large household, Lee quickly learned how to make money go further. To supplement welfare payments and food assistance funds, she earned extra money by raking leaves, collecting berries, and selling homemade pot holders. She also ate only part of her school lunch, so she could take the rest home to share with her siblings. Lee wrote in Made from Scratch, "If we had extra expenses, or even if we were $5 short, that meant we wouldn't be eating for the last few days of the month." Lee's mother, meanwhile, was consumed by a drug addiction that also made her violent. One night, Lee called 911, fearing that her mother had overdosed. On another occasion, Vicky grew so angry that she attacked Lee, leaving the girl bruised and bloody. Lee recalled in her book, "My eyes were swollen and my body was covered in welts." Not long after those events, Lee's stepfather returned to the family. However, it didn't get better, as Lee reports that he made sexual advances toward her. In 1982, 15-year-old Lee was sent to live with her biological father, but she soon felt homesick and fell into a serious depression. Lee wrote in her memoir, "It was the only time I ever considered taking my own life." While she was under the care of her father, police arrested Waldrop on rape charges. Lee reportedly witnessed the crime and had to testify. Waldrop was ultimately convicted of sexual assault in the 2nd degree and served a 1-year prison sentence. This meant that Lee was left without an immediate parental figure or guardian. Thankfully, her aunt and uncle, Bill and Peggy Singlehurst, informally adopted her. Lee told People, "There was a lot of drama and trauma going on in my family home that was above me." Lee later wrote of Singlehurst on Instagram, "He was a father to me, my only real dad." Lee dropped out of college in the 1980s and found work demonstrating home security and self-defense gear at trade shows. Then, in 1993, she created Curtain Craft, a series of easy-install curtain kits. After her invention was featured on television, Lee became a multi-millionaire. She weathered patent infringement lawsuits and then accepted a position in 1999 as a spokesperson for manufactured house company KB Home. Shortly thereafter, Lee began a relationship with KB Home's CEO, Bruce Carrots. Decades older than Lee, Carrots divorced his first wife, cashing out on $30 million in stock options to dissolve the marriage in 2001. A few months later, he married Lee. The relationship would end relatively quickly and amidst a major scandal. In May 2005, Lee, by then a star of semi-homemade cooking on Food Network, filed for divorce from Carrots. The official cause was irreconcilable differences.
Learn from it and move on. Don't wallow in it, and don't let it stifle you.
Months later, Carrots resigned from KB Home after it emerged that he'd illegally manipulated stock options for personal financial gain. For his crimes, a federal court sentenced Carrots to a $1 million fine, 2,000 hours of community service, and 8 months of house arrest. In March 2015, Lee received a phone call from her doctor. The results from a mammogram and biopsy had come in, and Lee was diagnosed with a type of early-onset breast cancer. Lee told Good Housekeeping, "That's how fast life turns. I started to understand how aggressive cancer is, and I decided to fight back just as aggressively."
I mean, seriously, priorities change when your life changes.
Lee documented every step of the cancer treatment and recovery process for the HBO documentary RX Early Detection, A Cancer Journey with Sandra Lee. Telling no one about the illness but her partner and closest relatives, Lee endured weeks of doctor's appointments and tests, eventually deciding to undergo a preventative double mastectomy. The cancer was initially present in 3 areas, and as treatment was a must, Lee opted for surgery to slow or stop the potential spread of the disease. However, the mastectomy resulted in an infection, which required several days of hospitalization. But 4 months after the procedure, Lee received word that she was in full remission.
I am cancer-free and I am ready to go.
Lee utilized her experience to urge the state of New York to pass a law that would make cancer centers stay open later into the evening and allow better access to those facilities. One factor in Lee's decision to treat her cancer with a mastectomy was her extensive family history with the disease. When Lee was a child, her grandmother was diagnosed with a virulent form of stomach cancer that was detected when it was already in an advanced stage. Lee said in a 2017 speech at the Miami Breast Cancer Conference, "For me, that really laid the groundwork for being extremely aggressive about dealing with the onset of cancer. Radiation treatment sent her grandmother's cancer into remission, although it returned when the older woman was 79. In 2020, Lee arranged a vow renewal and wedding recreation ceremony for the aunt and uncle who helped to raise her. It was something of a last request for her uncle, who was coping with both heart disease and a cancer diagnosis of his own. The couple died within 5 months of each other in 2023. The stress of dealing with cancer, as well as enduring cancer treatments, can take a tremendous physical toll on a patient. This was certainly Lee's experience, following her 2015 diagnosis and subsequent treatments, surgical procedures, and complications. While recovering from a double mastectomy, Lee lost a significant amount of weight. Then she set out to regain what she'd lost. Lee told Today, "I actually worked at it with my doctor as I was borderline underweight. I was so stressed after the double mastectomy that I was underweight."
I looked completely emaciated because I had lost 20 pounds in less than, I think, 2 weeks.
During the COVID-19 lockdowns of 2020, Lee added another 30 pounds to her frame. Not long after suffering from stress over cancer, Lee dealt with the negative psychological ramifications of her subsequent weight gain. She wrote on Instagram in January 2021, "I weighed in at 170 2 days before Christmas. None of my clothes fit, and worse, I feel terrible." After eliminating alcohol, red meat, and most carbohydrates from her diet, Lee shed 10 pounds in less than 2 weeks. Unfortunately, Lee's medical woes didn't end after she announced that her cancer was in remission. Several years after her initial cancer diagnosis, Lee was set for another surgical procedure. She said on Instagram, "It was a follow-up to my breast cancer surgery, but I had repeatedly put it off, and then COVID hit." Yet, during a gynecological checkup around 2022, a doctor noticed an alarming transformation in Lee's cells. After consulting with other doctors, Lee quickly scheduled the surgery she'd put off. Seeking to stop any cancer from returning, Lee underwent a full hysterectomy in March 2022. Lee suffered multiple complications from the procedure. After she was discharged, she experienced symptoms like vomiting that became so severe she was forced to visit an emergency room. There, doctors diagnosed an infection and noted that severe dehydration had dropped her kidney function down to a seriously low 30%, as she reported on Instagram.
There's 2 different ways cancer beats you up. Beats up your body, and it beats you up emotionally.
In the wake of the dissolution of her first marriage in 2005, Lee started a new romantic relationship. That was the year Lee attended a party in New York's exclusive Hamptons, where her friend, political advisor Alexandra Stanton, connected her with Andrew Cuomo, then a political hopeful working at a real estate firm. Lee and Cuomo soon began dating. The son of former New York Governor Mario Cuomo and once the head of the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Cuomo was elected governor of New York in 2010. The move made Lee the state's de facto first lady. Cuomo would eventually win 3 terms as governor, and he and Lee remained a couple until they separated in 2019. After the split, Lee moved to Malibu. Then, in 2021, 11 women, many of whom were former or current New York State employees, accused Cuomo of sexual harassment and misconduct. Lee refused to comment on the situation. Insiders told the New York Post that, while Lee was out of state attending to the health needs of elderly relatives, the governor likely carried on extramarital affairs. A former Cuomo staffer told the outlet, "Andrew was sleeping with at least one other woman who wasn't Sandra." Due to the controversy and facing impeachment, Cuomo resigned as governor of the state of New York in August 2021. In early 2021, Lee experienced 2 robbery attempts at separate properties. In February 2021, unidentified thieves gained entry into Lee's storage unit and made off with several pricey possessions. The items included many of the expensive and elaborate costumes she wore on her Food Network series, as well as outfits worn by Cher in the cast of a New York production of Cinderella. The thieves also took unspecified pieces of furniture from the unit. Lee wrote on Instagram, "I'd rather have given them away to a charity so they could have auctioned them off and raised money for a good cause. Clearly, whoever stole them needs them more than me." Mere days later, in the early morning hours of February 11th, a masked man was spotted on surveillance cameras attempting to gain entry into Lee's Malibu home via a lockbox. The suspect tried to enter twice, but was unsuccessful on both occasions. Lee installed extra security measures on her property and hired guards to protect herself following the attempt.
David Chang is a wildly successful celebrity chef, but he's also his own worst enemy. From mental health struggles to family illness, tragedy has never been far from him. A major theme in David Chang's memoir, Eat a Peach, is the near-constant voice inside his head telling him he's an imposter. While growing up in Northern Virginia, his father pushed him to excel as a golfer at a time when few Asian kids were involved in the sport. He won 2 consecutive state championships in his age group, but by his early teens, his confidence fell apart. As he recalled, "Kids I used to destroy began to catch up and then surpass me. That embarrassment defined me for a long time." When Chang began gaining widespread recognition as a chef, it was almost impossible for him to acknowledge his own success. In 2007, he was nominated for Rising Star Chef of the Year at the James Beard Awards, but he could hardly bring himself to attend the ceremony. As he wrote, "I respected the awards deeply, I just didn't respect myself." He ended up winning the award, but he deflected the attention by drinking heavily. Many East Asian Americans who are the children of immigrants have opened up about their experiences with tiger parenting. This stringent philosophy of child rearing involves pressuring your kids to achieve a high level of academic success, but its effectiveness has been called into question, with a 2013 study from the American Psychology Association showing that it doesn't turn children into prodigies. Having experienced tiger parenting himself, Chang is particularly skeptical about it. As he recalled in Eat a Peach, his father's love for him was distinctly conditional. He was a mediocre student who felt incapable of making his parents proud. He's aware that many first-generation Asian American kids were raised under much tougher circumstances than he was, but it's nevertheless quite clear that he has remained affected by this questionable parenting approach. As he recalled, "What happens when you live with a tiger that you can't please is that you're always afraid."
Too much criticism. They're tiger parents.
Chang has always liked Asian food, but he also felt a bit embarrassed over the smells of Korean cuisine that overtook his boyhood kitchen. In a soft act of defiance, he would eat chicken fingers, mozzarella sticks, and Hungry Man dinners when his mother and grandmother weren't around. As he got older, his complex feelings about race spread to more than just food.
My brothers and I were like, we only want to eat, white people food.
As Chang recalled in Eat a Peach, when he was in high school, he didn't feel like he was Asian enough to hang out with the other Asian students. And when he was in college, his white female classmates made it clear that they had no interest in dating Asian men. In general, it hasn't been easy for Chang to navigate the various intricacies of cultural influence in his life and society at large. Still, he understands the importance of paying respect to the places and people behind the food. In many ways, these personal experiences would eventually become extraordinarily useful in his culinary career. When David Chang was in college, his mother Sherry was diagnosed with breast cancer. She managed to survive that initial bout with the disease, and she remained cancer-free as her son started his journey towards becoming a professional chef. But just as he was gaining a foothold in the industry, her cancer came back. What made this second diagnosis especially tough was that Sherry was undergoing treatment, while Chang's father and brother were embroiled in a family feud. She would go on to fight the cancer on and off for 26 years until passing away in 2022. Just a couple years before that, in June 2020, Chang's father Joseph had also passed away from cancer of the bile duct. As David wrote on social media, "Like many immigrant kids, I had a very complicated relationship with him, but I loved him, and oftentimes try to imagine what I would be like if I survived the Korean War and lived in America in the 1960s. Not speaking the language or knowing anyone puts things into perspective." In his memoir, Chang described the origin of his first restaurant by writing, "Opening Noodle Bar had been a last gasp attempt at finding my place in the world before giving in to darker impulses. Momofuku was my identity, and it was born of my depression. Dark thoughts had plagued Chang since high school, and they were a source of deep shame. He tried journaling his feelings only to be mocked by a classmate who found what he had written. Therapy and antidepressants were also points of embarrassment, so he blew them off and embarked on an aimless trip to Japan after college. He even eventually began to fixate on suicide. Chang was determined not to burden his parents with the shame of a child killing himself, so he vowed to make his death look accidental. He once rode his bike recklessly through Manhattan traffic. Another time, he fell through a glass table after a drinking binge and wound up in the ER. He even walked in front of a city bus. Eventually, he tried therapy and found a doctor he connected with. This was the first person he told about his ambition of wanting to open a restaurant that he'd developed after visiting Japan. As he recalled, "I was ready to die, and I had something I needed to get off my chest before I did."
Almost everyone needs help, and
they're not going to talk about it.
Chang has long maintained that he performs best when the odds are stacked against him, but his thirst for pressure hasn't always been healthy. In fact, it has sometimes allowed his ever-present anxiety to grow to dangerous levels. As he wrote in Eat a Peach, "I'd actually come to depend on the emotional and mental instability." Chang knew that the restaurant business thrives on controlled chaos and immense pressure, so he leaned into his extreme tendencies to succeed. This resulted in a dark situation in which he could embrace the very anxiety that threatened to flatten him. As he prepared to open his third restaurant, Co., he experienced panic attacks at work and even developed shingles. He was prescribed medications to deal with the physical and mental symptoms of his anxiety, but it didn't help that he was also drinking excessively. Chang has described the push-pull nature of his anxiety and drive to succeed by writing in his memoir, "You think a salmon really wants to swim upstream and die? They have no choice. That's how I feel too." Chang is acutely aware that he's been dealing with anger issues his whole life. As he wrote in Eat a Peach, "The slightest error or show of carelessness from a cook could turn me into a convulsing, raging mass." This toxic reputation has resulted in some seriously bad press for Chang. When Momofuku Noodle Bar was in its infancy, a food blogger shared his experience by writing, "Last night the presentation was wildly inappropriate. The culprit was the restaurant's owner, David Chang. I was distracted from reading the menu as Mr. Chang reprimanded his dishwasher, ordering him to speak up. He began to scold the cook. Leaning over his shoulder, he brought his cook to the verge of tears, told him he was going to be fired, and thus made it impossible for me or my girlfriend to enjoy ourselves." As Chang's success grew, so too did his volatility. At his Momofuku Casino restaurant in Sydney, Australia, he reportedly screamed at a maintenance man for whistling and threatened him with a knife. The incident almost got him deported from the country, but Chang was apparently in a blackout state of anger and doesn't remember the details.
I don't feel really proud of how I behaved, sort of a petulant child.
Chang has had the same psychiatrist since the early 2000s, but it took a while before he was given a concrete diagnosis: bipolar disorder with an effective dysregulation of emotions. His first experiences with mania happened when he was in Japan, soon after college. As he wrote in his memoir, "I had boundless energy. I felt invincible. I finished War and Peace in a couple of days." But the dramatic lows were equally intense and sometimes lasted months, which contributed to Chang's suicidal ideation. He suffered in secret, but the effects of his bipolar disorder were nevertheless telling. When someone close to him died of an overdose days after Chang scolded him over the phone, it triggered a vicious cycle of ordering pizza late at night and gaining 50 pounds. On top of that, his effective dysregulation makes it so that he essentially can't tell his friends and enemies apart, while also serving as the driving force behind his anger. Chang and Anthony Bourdain appeared together at the 2009 New York Wine and Food Festival. Chang was already a well-known New York chef at the time, but he wasn't a public speaker by any means. Bourdain, on the other hand, was a natural. The speaking event turned out to be a cutting chat between two strong personalities, and Bourdain became both a friend and mentor to Chang. Chang was often uncomfortable in the spotlight and had trouble owning the persona of a bad boy, so Bourdain helped him navigate the progression from being a famous chef behind the scenes in the kitchen to a celebrity in front of TV screens. When Bourdain died by suicide in 2018, it sent shockwaves throughout the culinary world, and Chang was especially devastated. To cope, he decided to pen his memoir, which would mean going public with his bipolar diagnosis. Chang opened up about the loss of his friend in an interview with People magazine when he admitted, "It wasn't supposed to happen to him. That was supposed to happen to me. He was supposed to hold it together for all of us."
He was certainly always giving of his time to everyone else. And I was the beneficiary of that for many years.
David Chang met food writer Peter Meehan when the latter reviewed Momofuku Noodle Bar for the New York Times. They became fast friends and collaborated so often that when the first Momofuku cookbook was released in 2009, Meehan served as a co-author. Meehan was also an editor for Lucky Peach, a magazine celebrated for its innovative convergence of food and journalism that shuttered in 2017. He also appeared alongside Chang on season 1 of his Netflix series ugly delicious. But then suddenly it all fell apart. After his time at Lucky Peach, Meehan edited the food section of the Los Angeles Times, a position that he allegedly abused. In 2020, a Times staffer went into detail on social media about some troubling information regarding Meehan. This kicked off a flood of damaging reports, as multiple Lucky Peach and Los Angeles Times employees accused Meehan of sexual harassment and verbal abuse. Meehan ultimately resigned, and his social media accounts vanished. Meanwhile, Chang distanced himself from his old friend. In a request for comment from Eater, Chang said he couldn't disclose much about Meehan for legal reasons, while adding, "Had I been better, had I created an environment that was a polar opposite, with no shades of black or gray, I can imagine a scenario where they would have come to me, and that's what I've been wrestling with." After the release of Eat a Peach, David Chang faced a lot of pushback for acknowledging his poor behavior without going out of his way to make amends to those he hurt along the way. One section of the book features a painstaking series of copy editing style marks in which Chang has crossed out the vitriolic comments he made and replaced them with red-inked explanations of his mental state. It might be understandable why he approached his previous wrongdoings this way, but that didn't shield him from criticism of not doing enough. It's worth noting that his collaborator, Peter Meehan, faced some of the same criticisms Chang has come under fire for. Unlike Meehan, though, Chang has never been accused outright of sexual harassment, but the violent tantrums and public humiliation of staff members that characterized Meehan's undoing were right out of the Chang playbook. Chang has committed himself to self-reflection, but a somewhat toxic reputation nevertheless endures.